Chapter 399. June Moxie laughed out loud and whistled. The 50 members of the Heaven Destroyer team had been waiting for a long time. They followed the two and left the southern Heaven City. Seekong and Yi and the other man realized that they had been so depressed that they hadn't brought anything with them. In fact, they had even forgotten to bring their luggage and other necessities. But the money was still inside the luggage. Even a spirit Xian expert would have to eat a meal if they didn't have money. So, how could they eat without money? But when they turned around, they saw a group of 50 people quietly following behind them. They didn't say a word. Why are the bags on their backs so familiar? But this is the first time we've seen these people. So, how can the things on their backs be so familiar? It can't be, right? They're ours. Crap. That brat June Moxie has already calculated our reactions. He's already packed our bags and carried them on their back. They're worthy of being escorts. They're even carrying our bags. They're really quality. Then, he took a closer look at these 50 people. The cultivation of these guards was average. The strongest among them was only at the Gold Xian realm. But it could be said that all of them were at the Gold Xian realm. The only difference was that there was a difference in their rank. Their faces were dark and rough, and their eyes were sharp and glaring. They carried a fierce aura that seeped out of their souls. Are they a group of people? Are these only June Moxie's bodyguards? Crap! They're obviously a pack of hungry wolves on a cold winter's night. The bloodthirsty murderous aura on their bodies made Seekong and Yi and the other experts of Shen Xian feel frightened. It wouldn't be surprising if there were only 1 or 2 of them. After all, any aristocratic family would train some cold-blooded death warriors. And the highest quality ones would be like this. But June Sunshao had brought 50 of them. This was quite appalling. In fact, it was not strange at all. Under June Sunshao's super-advanced training, these guards, who had been idling around and waiting to die, had already completed the most essential and cruelest tempering. How could they be compared to ordinary men of sacrifice? It was no exaggeration to say that they were now a group of super-killing machines in human form. The leader of the group was a man with a cold expression and a body as dark as an iron tower. It was the leader of the Heaven Destroyer team, Li Tai. Just like his name, he really did look like him, especially the degree of darkness. Li Tai took a step forward and said respectfully, "Seniors, before we left, our young master asked us to bring a small thing for you 2 seniors, as a token of gratitude to you 2 seniors for standing up to help us. This small thing is enough to show our gratitude." As he said that, he took out 2 small jade bottles from his pocket and handed them over with both hands. "What's this?" Duanmu Chao Fan and Seekong and Yi took 1 each, and sized it up with curiosity. "This is the 10 years pill made by Young Master's sect. There are 3 pills in each bottle. Each pill can increase the cultivation of a Xian Qi expert by 10 years. Li Tai's eyes emitted a blazing light. Not for anything else, but for the Young Master's trust. Who wouldn't treat such a rare and precious treasure as a treasure? He was afraid of losing it, but the young master handed it to him just like that. It wasn't just 1 pill, but 2 bottles, a total of 6 pills. To Li Tai, this was not only a great honor, but also a great trust. Is this true?" Duanmu Chao Fan and Seekong and Yi were gobsmacked. Eating 1 pill can increase one's cultivation by 10 years? Is this the legendary elixir of immortality? This matter is absolutely true. This lowly one has heard the young master say that this is a miraculous elixir personally refined by his master. I dare say that it's one of a kind in the entire world. The young master has said that the 2 seniors have helped us a great deal, and we are unable to repay them. Therefore, we have specially gifted each of you 3 pills. I hope that the 2 seniors will not despise it." Li Tai said in a serious manner. "Despise it? This gift is too valuable. Why would I despise it?" Duanmu Chao Fan and Seekong and Yi were convinced when they heard that June Moxie's master had personally refined the elixir. They looked at the small jade bottle, and their eyes became as hot as the thigh of their first love. This was a godly elixir. The two of them carefully placed it in their bosoms. They patted it with their hands and then looked around. They seemed somewhat sneaky, and didn't have the demeanor of a powerful person like Shen Xian. They hadn't expected that June Moxie, that crafty brat, would be so generous. The two of them felt very happy in a split second. Their previous gloominess had vanished into thin air. Sikong and Yi took the lead and waved his hand. "Let's go. I'll take you to the Bailey clan to pick up the people." "Oh, we'll go there on the way." The wise man had spoken plainly, and the matter had been dealt with clearly. On behalf of the young master, this lowly one thanks the two seniors, Li Tai said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. The group of people continued on their way. Duanmu Chao Fan and Sikong and Yi were already very amiable. However, the two of them had started to feel depressed even though they had been excited at the beginning of the journey. The reason was very simple. The 50 people who had been accompanying the escorts had very strong personalities. They were like 50 pieces of wood apart from eating, sleeping, and hurrying along the journey. They didn't make a single sound. Sikong and Yi felt that chatting with them wasn't as good as chatting with Duanmu Chao Fan. After all, he could at least make a sound. Duanmu Chao Fan stuttered, and it was very strenuous for him to communicate. But he could still fart. These 50 people, on the other hand, were all 50 mute. "Are you June Moxie's bodyguards?" Sikong and Yi asked in high spirit. "Yes." Li Tai was a man of few words. But the others didn't even say yes. Their complexions didn't change, and it seemed as if they hadn't heard anything. "It seems that June Sunshao is very skillful in training his bodyguards. How did he train you? How did he train you to be so outstanding? Tell me so that I can learn from him." Sikong and Yi was very interested in this. "A Sikong clan, if I can master this training method." Li Tai stared. "What kind of training do you do every morning?" Sikong and Yi stared. "Is the training very hard?" Silence. "There are many people like you under June Moxie, right?" He was wooden. "June Sunshao's master is very powerful." Li Tai had an impatient look in his eyes. "Why is this Shen Xian acting like a sissy? There's no end to this June family." Sikong and Yi was left speechless. What kind of subordinates are these? I'm going to suffocate to death. I can't even speak a word. I'm not trying to pry into your secrets. I'm an expert like Shen Xian. I'm asking you Gold Xian kids questions because I think highly of you. I'm condescending. But you're treating me like this. The real condescension is yet to come. Sikong and Yi had finally encountered a group of bandits with great difficulty. So, he was extremely depressed. So, he decided to vent his anger on them. Then, he would reveal a bit of Shen Xian's imposing manner. And that group of little bandits would kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. Then, he would let these Gold Xian kids know the tyrannical strength of Shen Xian. However, he hadn't expected that dozens of bandits would turn into minced meat in a split second. The entire battle had been resolved in the blink of an eye. Then, the road had been swept clean, the corpses had been buried, and they had retreated. The entire process hadn't taken more than half a cup of tea's time to finish. Sikong and Yi was flabbergasted. However, he wasn't surprised by the fighting strength of these bodyguards. After all, the strength of a group of Gold Xian kids couldn't enter the eyes of a powerhouse like Shen Xian even if they were extraordinary. It was because he had discovered that one of the guys had been eating a meat bun while walking. Then, he had rushed forward with a meat bun in his mouth during the battle. Then, he had hacked 3 bandits to death with a cha-cha-cha sound. Blood had splashed all over his body. Even the meat bun in his mouth had been dyed red. In fact, it was still dripping with blood. Then, this guy had come back in a leisurely manner. Then, he had sheathed his saber at his waist. Then, he had opened his big mouth, and had chewed the meat bun twice. Then, he had swallowed it. Then, He had taken out another one from his bosom, and had eaten it with relish. Blurg. Even a powerhouse like Shin Xian couldn't help but vomit. These guys are too abnormal. I swear that I'll never eat at the same table with them again. Are you relieved now? Jun Moxie asked Bailey Luoyun as he watched Sikong and Yi and his bodyguards flee. Thank you very much, young Master Jun. Bailey Luoyun's eyes were full of gratitude. His father's family was the only weakness in his heart. However, Bailey Luoyun didn't have any misgivings anymore. The Duanmu family's lord and the Sikong family's #1 expert had come forward at the same time. So, how could the Bailey family dare to not give them face? After all, these two big families weren't inferior to the Bailey family. Don't ever say the word thank you to me. You must understand that I wouldn't have spent so much effort on a good-for-nothing. Moreover, you can call me young master from now on. You don't need to call me young master, Jun Moxie smiled. Then, he took out a folded piece of paper from the long sleeve of his white robe. This is what you need to accomplish in the next 2 months. You must accomplish these things in 2 months. Then, come to the Tianxiang city and look for me. Jun Moxie smiled and said, I'll still take care of your family if you can't accomplish these things in 2 months. But you don't need to come back. Jun Moxie's eyes emitted a threatening sharpness. Bailey Luoyun's body trembled. He took the white paper and unfolded it to look at it. Then, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Jun Moxie in astonishment. Then, he lowered his head and carefully looked at it. There are exactly 50 people on this list. There are officials, rich merchants, and Xian experts. There is evidence of their crimes behind each of their names. I demand that you kill all 50 of them within 2 months. Furthermore, you have to make a name for yourself, a name that belongs to you. Do you understand? Jun Moxie slowly said, Good and evil will be repaid in the end. Heaven's justice can't be overturned. If you want to kill someone, let the clouds fall from the heavens. Bailey Luoyun's body trembled. His eyes slowly became sharp, and a dense murderous aura blossomed in them. He finally understood what Jun Moxie wanted him to do. The only thing you must remember is that you mustn't leave any traces after you kill someone. You mustn't get injured, and you mustn't let anyone know that you've done it. But you must create a huge sensation, Jun Moxie slowly said. You can come to the Tianxiang city to look for me after you've accomplished these 50 tasks. You'll be my arm for the rest of my life. Chapter 400. Outbreak today. The first update has arrived. The 7th outbreak of this month. It has already happened 7 times. That's more than the previous outbreak of a month, and it hasn't even been half a month. Bailey Luoyun had a target and a plan in his mind in the blink of an eye. But he didn't say it. He only needed to do it. He only needed to say a few words before the completion of the plan. There was nothing to say. And it would be meaningless even if he did say it. He needed to kill 50 people within 2 months. So, he didn't have much time left. Bailey Luoyun cautiously put the white paper in his bosom. He then raised his head and looked at Jun Moxie. Then, he smiled in a relaxed manner. I'm going. The sooner the better. Jun Moxie smiled. He then patted his shoulder. You can do it. Bailey Luoyun nodded. He then turned around and started walking. He didn't want to waste any more time. Wait a minute. Take this. Jun Moxie raised his hand and a small jade bottle fell into Bailey Luoyun's hand. There are 2 pills in this bottle. The yellow pill can cure hundreds of poisons, and the red pill can increase your martial power by 10 years. Bailey Luoyun's fingers tightly grasped the small jade bottle. He didn't turn around. Instead, he held the hilt of the sword at his waist. His body paused for a moment. A trace of happiness and gratitude flashed across his face. Then, he suddenly strode forward without any hesitation. He disappeared from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. Jun Wui, Solitary Eagle, and the three Dongfang swords didn't interrupt while Jun Moxie and Bailey Luoyun were talking. The five experts knew that Jun Moxie was cultivating his own power in this conversation. It was a power that belonged to him alone. However, Jun Moxie didn't try to avoid them. In fact, he didn't try to avoid them at all. Therefore, the five experts felt satisfied in their hearts. The five of them would undoubtedly affect Jun Mosie's authority if they were to intervene at this time. No matter what they said. The five of them were all wily old foxes. How could they not know this? At this moment, seeing that Jun Moxie was finally done, Jun Wui and the Dongfang brothers looked at each other and said, "Mosie, come with me, we have something to tell you." Solitary Eagle laughed heartily and said, "You guys continue chatting, this old man will take a stroll around." With that said, he turned around and disappeared without a trace. He could roughly guess what these people wanted to say, but the solitary falcon wasn't interested in it at all. As far as he was concerned, the most important thing in the world was the advancement of his Xian Qi and his martial art. What kind of love and affection was this? Therefore, the great Supreme Eagle had no interest in participating in this. Instead, he slipped away as soon as possible. Jun Wui, Dongfang Wenqing, and the others looked somewhat embarrassed. After all, they had to discuss these taboo topics with their juniors. The four of them were somewhat embarrassed. Seeing the five of them walking towards the big tent, Dugu Xiaoyi and Guan Qinghan also looked at each other and quietly followed them. The two women wanted to understand why Jun Moxie had such a big change today. The contrast between the two images was too obvious. What was even more strange was, the two women had been secretly watching the battle just now. Each of them had different thoughts in their minds. Dugu Xiaoyi thought, sure enough, this guy is so powerful. Humph, after enduring for so long, he finally jumped out. This lady's eyesight is still the best. Mo Siegij is the first person I saw. No one can snatch him from me. But Guan Qinghan's thoughts were much more complicated than Dugu Xiaoyi's. She stared at Jun Moxie's back in a daze. She thought, so, he really gave in to me in the past. In this society, women had always been the vassals of men. Which man would be willing to be bullied by a woman? She thought of how Jun Moxie had pestered her for the past few years. He had often been beaten and scolded by her. She had never given him a good face. But this man, who was so skillful, had always tolerated her. He would rather use a despicable attitude to get close to her. She thought of how Jun Moxie would seriously accompany her to practice martial art. Then, he would be tortured by her. But, he would still laugh like a rascal. Suddenly, Guan Qinghan's heart was filled with sweetness. Such an arrogant man was willing to put down his pride for the woman he loved. How rare was that? It was easy to find a priceless treasure, but hard to find a lover. Now, this man had already revealed his talent. He was ready to show off his peerless elegance to the world. And at this time, she had become his woman in a helpless and coincidental moment. She was also the first woman he had acknowledged. Could this be fate? But how could this matter be so simple? How many things would she have to face in the future? Guan Qinghan was muddle-headed as she thought about her own matters. She was pulled by Dugu Xiaoyi. Intentionally or unintentionally, they quietly arrived outside the marshal's tent. Jun Wui and the others sat down with a heavy heart. The four elders looked at each other. But no one opened their mouths to speak first. They didn't know how to open their mouths. After all, they didn't know what to say. Even though they knew that the two women were eavesdropping outside the door, there was no need to hide this matter from them. After all, they were all involved. Jun Moxie looked strangely at his three uncles. What's the matter? Why do all of you have this expression? Did something happen to your family? What could happen at home? It's all because of you. The four of them scolded at the same time. They spoke in unison. Even if they were purely cooperating, they wouldn't be so orderly. After that, they couldn't help but look at each other. Mosie, I have just discussed with your three uncles about the matter between you and Qinghan. Jun Wui had a complicated look in his eyes. He said helplessly, "Although I have already adopted Qing Han as my daughter and cancelled the engagement between our two families, the outside world still doesn't know about it." "Ahem, even your grandfather doesn't know about it, huh? What's the matter?" "Third uncle, what are you trying to say?" Jun Moxie wasn't stupid. He really didn't think of it. In his mind, Guan Qing Han was with him. Even if there were some rumors, it wouldn't be too serious. No matter who this woman was, her husband, that is, his own brother, was already dead. Did he want such a beautiful woman to be a widow for the rest of her life? They had only met a few times. They hadn't even gone through the wedding ceremony. Yet, he wanted her to be a virgin. What kind of logic was this? Who didn't want to pursue their own lifelong happiness? Since the Jun family intended to give Guan Qing Han freedom, and had already given her freedom, then Guan Qing Han would naturally have to marry someone else. Since she was going to marry sooner or later, she could marry someone else. Why couldn't she marry me? Therefore, even though Jun Moxie had thought of this matter, he didn't think that it was a big deal. This was the thinking of his previous life. However, he had neglected the fact that men and women should be on guard against each other at this time. The corruption of etiquette and morality was very serious. That was completely different from the situation on Earth before he had transmigrated. The guard between men and women in this feudal era was even comparable to the Song dynasty when Confucianism was at its peak. "I really don't know what you're thinking, boy. You may be ignorant and incompetent, but you should have thought that your grandfather would be furious if he found out about this matter." Jun Wui looked at his nephew and said, "The head of the Guan family will inevitably be ashamed if he finds out about this. So, I've discussed it with your uncles. You won't follow us back to Tianxiang after the army has broken camp. You'll go to the Dongfang family first, and see your mother and grandmother. After all, you haven't seen them for more than 10 years. So, they're your flesh and blood. I'll handle this matter as soon as possible. Wait until your grandfather's anger has subsided, and everything has calmed down, then you'll come back. Otherwise, your grandfather is still angry at the moment." Jun Moxie frowned. He didn't quite understand. "Third uncle, are you saying that you want me to go out and lie low for a while?" "You're not a fool, boy. That's exactly what I meant." Jun Wui sighed. "This matter still requires a lot of maneuvering to eliminate many negative influences." "What negative influences? Why is grandfather angry?" "Third uncle, what are you talking about?" Jun Moxie suddenly exploded. "What influence? Don't tell me that this matter is a disgrace to the family?" Guan Qing Han, who was outside the tent, suddenly covered her mouth with her slender jade-like hands. 2 lines of tears flowed out of her eyes. "This matter is a disgrace to the family." "What is it?" Dongfang Wenqing and the other two, as well as Jun Wui, were muttering in their hearts. "What's wrong with this boy? He's usually a smart person. How can he be so muddle-headed?" The 4 of them knew that Jun Moxie and Guan Qing Han couldn't be blamed for this matter. But this was the result, and this was the truth. And this truth was a mistake. At the very least, before the world recognized Guan Qing Han's new identity, it would be an absolute mistake. "Third uncle, this is for the good of the 2 of you." Jun Wui frowned. "I'm not willing to let you go out to hide. But you have to know, in this world, you can't do whatever you want. We need to work hard for all of this. I believe that it won't take long for this matter to fade away. When everything is settled, everything can be discussed. Don't you want to see your mother and grandmother?" "No. These are 2 different things. I will definitely visit my mother and grandmother, but not now." Jun Moxie resolutely refused. "I will never hide in the Dongfang family and wait for the result passively. That's not me, Jun Moxie." The 4 of them didn't expect him to be so agitated. They looked at each other in surprise. This is obviously the best way to solve this awkward situation. What's wrong with this boy? Jun Moxie suddenly stood up. I don't know what kind of D*Ned custom this world has, and I don't care what other people think of this matter. But there's no room for discussion. I won't make any concessions, and I won't compromise. I won't run away. Is it right for a woman to be a widow? Don't forget, this woman hasn't even seen her husband a few times. She hasn't even bowed to heaven and earth to get married, let alone having fun. What's the point of this so-called marriage? Can't a woman pursue her own happiness? Since our June family has decided to give her happiness, then why can't she marry me? Am I not a man? Can't I give her happiness? Not to mention, she's already my woman. Why do we care about what other people say? What other people think? Does it have anything to do with us? Those rotten scholars are just a fart. If they annoy me, I'll fucking unify the world, and then burn the books and bury the scholars. I'll destroy their roots. We'll all be finished together. June Moxie was a little angry, and his eyes were filled with a crazy killing intent. Those who want monthly votes must be explosive. This month, I've been explosive until now. I suddenly feel tired and tired. I need brothers and sisters to give me motivation. I need to pull myself together. After writing this chapter, I lay on the chair and looked at the starry sky outside the window. I was in a daze for a long time. A man's responsibility must never be evaded. To fight the world for one person. If it was me, can I do it? I'd rather betray the heavens than betray you. But now you're a woman. Isn't that a big joke? Chapter 401. Emotion, don't get agitated. I've never said that you can't be together. I'm just saying that this matter should be postponed for a period of time. Yes. Ching Han and you are now husband and wife. This is a fact. I don't need you to remind me. Everyone here also wants to facilitate this good thing. No one wants to separate you. You need to understand this. Jun Wui pounded the table. But this matter also needs time. You need to give us some time to mediate, right? Wait until Ching Han's identity is clarified and announced to the world. I'll immediately conduct a wedding for you, so that she can be your wife fair and square. Fair and square. Can't you even wait for a little bit of time? Do you want to be condemned by thousands of people, and be reviled by tens of thousands of people? Will you only be satisfied when your family's reputation is ruined, and you let the world laugh at you? So what? June Moxie didn't show any weakness and also glared at him. Third uncle, do you know that if I just leave and hide like a tortoise, then who will bear all these mistakes, all these pressures? Who will bear them? June Moxie suddenly turned around, and his fingertips streaked across the tent like a bolt of lightning, and the curtain at the entrance swooshed, as if it had been cut by a sharp knife, and fluttered down, revealing Guan Ching Han's tearful face, and Dugu Xiaoi's panic-stricken and helpless expression. The tent was silent, and no one spoke a word. Who will bear it? Is there even a need to say it? I've left, I've relaxed, I've also escaped all the punishments, and all the infamy afterwards has nothing to do with me. But this doesn't mean that all these things are gone. There still needs to be someone to bear it, and that person is her. Guan Ching Han. June Moxie strode over, and grabbed Guan Ching Han's arm and pulled her in. My escape will cause this weak woman to bear the infamy for me. Let the woman who had sacrificed everything for the June family bear it. June Moxie's face turned red. He tried his best to suppress his anger, but to no avail. It's my woman who will bear all of this for me. June Moxie stared at Jun Wui, his eyes glowing. Third uncle, you've been through it. How could you not know the power of those rumors? Condemned by 1,000 people, he died without a cause. Not to mention such a crime? Do you think that a weak woman like her can bear it? Aren't you trying to force her to death? Guan Ching Han's delicate body trembled like a fallen leaf in the wind. Her originally cold face was filled with helplessness. Even though she was strong, even though she had more endurance than the average secular woman, in the face of the moral condemnation of the entire world, she was still an incomparably weak woman. She is my adopted daughter, and also the wife of my niece. I will definitely protect her. I will hide Qing Han at home and won't let her hear any gossip. By the time she can show herself, everything will have already calmed down. Jun Wui was a little emotional. Don't tell me that I don't even know about this. Will it really be calmed down? Jun Moxie snorted and said, Let's not talk about those people with ulterior motives. There are so many people in the world who are bored. They are filthy and vicious in the dark. Secretly, they are thieves and prostitutes. However, they can stand on the moral high ground and criticize others. Haven't I seen a lot of them? This storm, I dare say, if it weren't for my existence, perhaps it would never have subsided. Unless Guan Qing Han takes the blame and commits suicide, this matter can only be washed clean with blood. So, I'll protect my woman myself. Jun Mo Xie's voice was already filled with an unparalleled sharpness, and was brimming with a bloody killing intent. He straightened his body and looked at the four people proudly. I will never run away from my responsibility. I will never run away. I don't care who she was in the past. I only know one thing. She is my woman now. And she has become my woman to save me. Jun Moxie's eyes were shining with blood-red murderous intent. I don't care what happened in the past. I don't know what my feelings were like in the past. But right now, I only know one thing. Guan Qing Han is my Jun Moxie's woman. No one can hurt my woman. Jun Mo Xie's voice was resounding and resounding. If I, a man, am to hide like a turtle in its shell, and let a woman carry this mountain of infamy, and face the torrential criticism of the world on my behalf. Jun Moxie sneered and said, If I really hide and avoid my responsibility, can I still be considered a man? Can I still be considered a person? Don't forget the Jun family's teachings. If you have a bird, you must be a man. You must be indomitable. Go to hell. Even if the world is cursing and criticizing me, so what? Jun Mo Xie laughed arrogantly. My woman's world, I alone can hold it up for her. Even if I have to kill everyone in the world, I will still be stubborn. I won't retreat even if I have to die 10,000 times. Guan Qing Han suddenly burst into tears. She cried loudly. Since last night, she had been worried about this matter. Guan Qing Han really didn't know how she would face all of this if Jun Moxie really went into hiding. Perhaps she could only die, but right now, Jun Mo Xie's every word was so resolute, so decisive, and so murderous. This man didn't say any sweet words or pledge of undying love. But at this moment, this man was ready to go against the world for her, to go against the moral values of the world. For her, he would fight the world. Since ancient times until now, how many people in the world could go this far for their own women? All of a sudden, all of the apprehensions in Guan Qing Han's heart vanished into thin air. Du Xiaoyi looked at Jun Moxie's straight back and his words, as if he was declaring war. Her eyes were full of admiration. She looked at Guan Qing Han with envy. If there comes a day, will he do the same for me? Ha ha ha, good. Suddenly, Jun Wui's stern voice changed. His face was full of praise. He clapped his hands and said, Not bad. Jun Wuyi's nephew is truly worthy. This is an indomitable spirit, and a man's sense of responsibility is worthy of praise. This is a real man. The three Dongfang brothers were also looking at Jun Mo Xie with endless gratification in their eyes. Dongfang Wendao laughed heartily and said, Good spirit, you are indeed the son of the general in white, Jun Wuhui. Only a few people in the world can match your determination. As expected of my nephew, his lofty sentiments really cover the heavens. Don't worry, even if the whole world goes against you, Uncle will stand by your side. Jun Moxie was startled and said, So all of you are testing me? It's not just a test. Jun Wu-yi looked at his nephew with satisfaction and said, There's a lot of helplessness in this matter. If you had readily agreed to go and hide, then it wouldn't have been a big deal. After all, the current etiquette is very strict, and no one dares to violate it. There is nothing wrong with going out to hide, but it will still lack the responsibility of a man. Especially for a man of the June family. But under the current circumstances, saying it was one thing, but there were only a few people in the world who could truly take on this responsibility. Monsieur, uncle is very happy. My nephew did not disappoint me. You are indeed an indomitable man. Don't worry. Uncle will do his best to help you. There will definitely be result. But, with your grandfather, you might have to suffer a little. I can't help you with this. Jun Wui smiled and said. Jun Moxie nodded and gritted his teeth. Third uncle, don't worry. I can still hold on. Since I have chosen this path, I, Jun Moxie, will walk to the end without any regrets even if I have to kneel. Good. Good spirit. Jun Wui and Dongfang Wendao cheered at the same time. Guan Qing Han looked at Jun Mosie's resolute face from the side, and suddenly felt a surge of tenderness in her heart. An inexplicable sense of security filled her heart, and she silently lowered her head. Her cheeks started to flush red. Dugu Xiaoi pouted at the side. Her eyes were filled with unwillingness. Jun Wui was excited. He bent over the table and wrote quickly. After a long while, he threw away the pen in his hand and shouted. Guards! A guard hurried in. Quickly send this letter to the capital. Hand it over to the old master. It's top secret. It's urgent. Jun Wui ordered Lengling. Yes. Pass down my order. Every soldier in my army is to be silenced. If anyone dares to divulge any information about the Southern Heaven City, be it small or trivial, military or civilian affairs, they will be punished according to military law. Execute their entire families. Exterminate their 9 generations. Jun Wui's voice was full of murderous intent. For the sake of his nephew's lifelong happiness and the future of the Jun family, this blood general was using his authority for the first time in his life to issue an order other than war. Moreover, his murderous intent was soaring to the heavens. From his voice, it could be heard that if anyone dared to disobey, Jun Wui wouldn't mind killing them. Yes, the order was quickly passed down, and the 20,000 soldiers were in awe. Especially the 2 squads next to Jun Moxie's tent. They felt their legs tremble. Even today, some of them were still talking about it with reckless abandon. Although they didn't spread it out, they had talked about it quite a bit. Today, when the order was given, they were the ones who understood the meaning of the order the most among the 20,000 soldiers. Everyone felt as if they had taken a trip to the gates of hell. Suddenly, these 2 squads became the most disciplined people in the entire army. In fact, they could be regarded as role models. While Jun Moxie was speaking, 2 voices were whispering in a distant tree. Moreover, it was obvious that they didn't agree with each other. Elder sister, this is really unexpected. That Jun Moxie is so loyal and responsible. How could he be as despicable and shameless as elder sister said? Elder sister, could there be some misunderstanding? How could I misunderstand? This kid is sinister and vicious. His actions are despicable and despicable. It's hard to list his crimes. He must be faking it. Really? She was unsure and doubtful. Of course, maybe he found out that we were outside, and is putting on a show for us. How could this be? In any case, he's not a good person. He's definitely not a good person. But I still can't believe it. Such a good man, how could he, humph? Chapter 402. Today's eruption, the 3rd chapter has been delivered. The 4th chapter is in the process of making great efforts. Jun Wu Yi and Wan Wu Yen bid farewell to the Southern Heaven City's General Wan Wu Yen before departing. It seemed as if they were very reluctant to part ways. It could be said that these 2 men had hit it off at first sight. Wu Yen appreciates 3rd General Jun's good intentions. But, the people of Tiannan have been sharing weal and woe with me for so many years. We've been through thick and thin together. So, they're no different from my family. I can't bear to part with them. Moreover, if I leave, won't the people of Tiannan suffer if they start to levy taxes again? Wu Yan is willing to stay in Tiannan until I die of old age. Jun Wu Yi had proposed to transfer Wan Wu Yan after he had returned. But Wan Wu Yan hadn't hesitated at all. I won't mention it if that's the case. Wu Yan will try his best to retain General Wan's position in Tiannan if there's a transfer. Jun Wui cupped his fists and bowed deeply. Many thanks for 3rd General Jun's help. Wan Wu Yan was overjoyed. He then stood up and solemnly said, Wu Yan won't be able to accompany the general as he moves unhindered across the world. But I have no regrets. I only wish for the general to display his heroic spirit. He will destroy everything in his path, and achieve the unrivaled prestige of our Tianxiang. Take care, General. We'll meet again someday. The two men bowed deeply and parted reluctantly. The sound of hooves rose like a whirlwind. It gradually formed a torrent of iron and steel. The army's flag fluttered in the wind as it faced the whistling autumn wind. The Tianxiang army was advancing rapidly on the main road like a long dragon. The army's appearance was unusually neat as it returned triumphantly. Not a single person had been lost in this battle of Tiannan. This had made the soldiers who had been prepared to bleed and sacrifice their lives. But they were now overjoyed. Before coming here, everyone was already aware that this expedition was equivalent to giving their lives away. Although soldiers lived an iron-blooded life, their orders were like mountains, and they faced death with equanimity. As long as they were human, they would fear death. No expert or brave warrior was an exception, and they couldn't help but feel a sense of desolation as if their lives were about to pass away and men were at the end of their road. If the nest was overturned on this expedition, no egg would be spared. It would be good if even 1 out of 10 troops could survive. But no one had expected that under such a vast and extremely destructive dark beast tide, it actually didn't cause any heavy casualties. And it was even to the extent that they didn't even have the chance to send out their troops to receive the enemy. Their skin wasn't even scratched in the slightest, and they could be considered to have started strong but ended weak. They returned to the capital just like that, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they went on a vacation. Everyone seemed as if they'd awoken from a nightmare, and they naturally rejoiced and danced. At this moment, their footsteps were extremely light as they walked on the road back home. As for those who had been singled out by their families and the emperor, they felt as if they had just escaped from death. Only a small number of guards had died on this trip, but it was like they had gone on a vacation, and they had even contributed greatly. Once this kind of thinking spread out, it immediately caused those surviving family guards who had gone out to battle to be extremely dissatisfied. They didn't even show the slightest bit of gratitude, and that young Master Jun even gave each of us 100 taels of silver. As for our brothers who had died, the Jun family had even made a promise, and it would all depend on what they would do after returning to the capital. You have to know that we had done this completely for you. Otherwise, who would come to this damned place to die? Who didn't want to hug their wife and sleep comfortably at home? The young master that they had served so loyally was actually not as good as someone they had never met before. There was indeed a gap between people. But these negative emotions were naturally not seen by those young masters who were in an extremely excited state. Even if they saw it, they wouldn't care. After all of these people had grown up in an extremely self-centered environment, and they knew that this expedition would be a trip of 9 out of 10. Everyone's heart was filled with grievance and resentment. Why are other brothers enjoying life at home, and we have to come out to die? Which one of us isn't born from a father and raised by a mother? Could it be that we are worthless and you are precious? Not to mention, just a few days ago, there was news from various places in the capital that all the families were fighting for the position of the family head. There were also rumors that these people who had gone out to battle had already been abandoned, and some of them weren't even nominated. The words of 1 or 2 people might be false, but what about the words of hundreds of people? Right now, almost everyone in the capital was saying the same thing, so what? This couldn't help but make many of the young masters who had participated in the battle extremely angry. Why, you bunch of trash can stay at home comfortably and wait to take over the position of family head. We came out to fight with our lives on the line, and we took such a huge risk, and yet our nomination was cancelled? You are trash, but we are the heroes. The glory in front of us was all exchanged with our lives. Although we didn't go to the battlefield, it was because we didn't have the opportunity, and not because we didn't work hard. Well, since we've already arrived at the battlefield, we also used our lives to participate in this battle. We're here. This is 100% battle achievement. Therefore, on the way back, the young masters of the aristocratic families were like fighting cocks, and were even more high-spirited than when they had arrived. Everyone's eyes were filled with an awe-inspiring battle intent, and the target of this battle intent was naturally their brothers who were still sitting at home, enjoying the fruits of others' labor. Everyone had a common enemy, and was gnashing their teeth in anger, and sharpening their blades. It was easy to imagine that once these guys returned to Tianxiang, they would inevitably be like a pack of red-eyed wolves and mad dogs, and would mercilessly engage in a class struggle against those who had plotted for the position of family head. A battle of power that would never end until one side was dead. However, they didn't know that ever since the news of the army's safe and triumphant return had spread out, the brothers who had stayed behind in the capital had started to panic, and had become anxious. This was because the rumors hadn't died down yet, and everyone was still talking about how the people who had gone out to battle had gained honor and glory, and had returned as the ideal successor to the family head. It didn't matter whether they had gone to the battlefield or not, as long as they had risked their lives, and had participated in the battle. That would explain everything. Therefore, the people who had stayed behind in the capital were also on high alert, and were ready for battle at dawn. Once those damned brothers who hadn't died returned, they would inevitably face a fierce battle, and a civil war between the two families. Both sides were already on high alert, and had already arranged their battle formations, even though they were separated by thousands of miles. You're prepared? But I'm also prepared. Who's afraid of who? Of course, there were always exceptions in this world, and not all the young masters of the aristocratic families were like this. For example, the Dugu family, the Li family, and the biggest winner of this war, the Jun family. However, everyone in the Jun family, including the third master Jun Wui, was in a heavy mood, even more so than the young masters of the aristocratic families. The matter between Jun Moxie and Guan Qinghan had come at a very bad time. Jun Moxie was bound to face a tidal wave of rumors and slanders when he returned. Jun Wui estimated that this attack would be like a surging tide, and wouldn't be able to contain it. Jun Moxie had the reputation of being a debauchee in the Tianxiang city. Moreover, this guy had greatly offended those great scholars during the Scholarly Scholars Autumn Festival. One must know that those great scholars had enormous influence in the imperial court, and many of the imperial censors and imperial censors had come from their schools. Da Xiao was currently holding a military post, and it was a big taboo for him to commit lewd acts day and night in the barracks, and there was a risk that he might be turned around at any time. Moreover, Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiaoyi were not part of the military, and so it could be said that even the commander-in-chief Jun Wui wouldn't be able to escape the blame of the strict military order, let alone Jun Moxie. Not to mention that in this era, the relationship between men and women was extremely strict, and Jun Moxie's behavior was tantamount to bullying his sister-in-law, and the heavens couldn't tolerate it. With such a strong reason, how could they let Jun Moxie off easily? Moreover, the Jun family was an outstanding military power, and had always been at odds with the civil and military officials. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to attack, and he didn't know how this matter would develop in the end. In short, the prospects weren't optimistic. Moreover, Jun Wui could already confirm that this scandal had been spread back to the imperial court, and although he had issued a gag order, but there were many spies and informants of the imperial family in the army, so how could they listen to his military orders in private? Presumably, they had already made preparations to attack. Therefore, General Jun Wui, who was supposed to be proud of his success, was somewhat worried and frowned the whole way. Although his nephew was brimming with talent and was a prodigy, how could he remain calm in the face of the world's idle chatter? Moreover, Guan Qing Han was so delicate, so how could she face the countless raging waves? If the enemies of the Jun family were to launch an attack together, the accumulated hatred of several generations could be said to be as high as the mountains and as deep as the seas, and he believed that no one would let go of such a great opportunity. The more Jun Wui thought about it, the more difficult it became for him. On the contrary, Jun Moxie was leisurely the whole way, and was even calmer than when he had left, as if he didn't care about the upcoming attack, and the overwhelming public opinion he would have to face, and was actually more relaxed than anyone else, to the extent that he even chased out the remaining members of the Heavenly Destroyer and Spirit Devourer team before he set off. Jun Moxie's objective was very simple. You guys don't walk the same road from Tiannan to Tianxiang and change to another road. If you encounter any bandits, act on your own, and don't leave a single one alive, and exterminate them all. The more you kill, the better, but don't kill the innocent. Before I return to Tianxiang, you guys must clean up the road and go back. The young Master Jun didn't even leave a single follower behind. Instead, he just hung around in the group. During the day, he would smile mischievously and try to get close to Guan Qing Han. Then, he would bicker with Dugu Xiaoyi. Sometimes he would go to the middle of the group and brag to the veterans. He would tell a few dirty jokes, but he would disappear at night. So, no one knew what he was up to. There were no more major incidents along the way, and if there was anything strange, it would be that the weapons of the private armies and guards of the various families had been stolen every night, and what was even more bizarre was that there was no trace of the theft at all. It was as if the air had evaporated and disappeared without a trace. But these weapons were not under the control of the army, and even if they were stolen, it wouldn't be considered a major incident, and would only be recorded every day. If it was really the army's military equipment that was stolen, it would be a major incident, but even if there were people who went to record every day, and no matter how strict the guards were, and how diligent they were, the weapons would still be stolen every night. They used all the defensive methods, but to no avail. Not even the shadow of a ghost could be seen. After a long time, everyone finally gave up, thinking, Motherf ***, if you want to steal, then steal. We can't catch the thief anyway, as long as he doesn't steal my head, it's fine. If he wants to steal, then so be it. It's not like it's some divine weapon. If it's lost, then so be it. Chapter 403. You really can't blame the guards for not putting in enough effort. A saber that was tightly guarded by as many as 50 people suddenly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. How can you guard against such an extremely mysterious thing? Moreover, this kind of thing wasn't the first or second time. The other weapons that were lost were all like this. They were all inexplicably lost. It's really impossible to guard against it. Forget it, isn't it just a saber and a sword? All the people who lost their weapons were comforting themselves and cursing at the same time. Damn it, if you have such stealing skills, it's more than enough to steal the Emperor's treasury. You have nothing better to do, so why did you come and steal a few broken sabers? It's really hard to understand. F***ck. In the past few days, Dugu Xiaoyi almost used all her skills to launch a powerful offensive against Jun Moxie. This valiant little girl finally became anxious when she saw that Guan Qing Han was about to succeed. For the sake of her future lifelong happiness, the little girl didn't care what others thought of her. This made the brothers of the Dugu family who followed her to the expedition so anxious that their mouths were bubbling, but it was to no avail. On the contrary, Guan Qing Han had completely returned to her usual cold and aloof self since the day of the meeting in the big tent. She didn't even spare a glance at June Moxie. She was afraid that she would avoid him, but June Moxie wasn't discouraged at all. He was defeated again and again, but he still fought again and again, never getting tired of it. The thickness of this Master Dashao's skin had really reached the extent of turning the city wall. During this period of time, it had really opened the eyes of many officers and soldiers. June Moxie didn't have to pester Guan Qing Han. Every morning, he would come to take a stroll, greet the officers and soldiers nearby, and then knock on the door. Then, he would come back and chat with the soldiers, waiting for the two girls to come out to wash up. Then, he would go up to ask them and say a few words with a cheeky smile. It didn't matter if he paid attention to him or not, he would never pester them. Well, the morning is over. But when he was done, Dugu Xiaoyi started to get into trouble. Sometimes, she did not even wait for June Moxie to finish grooming and would immediately pester him. It was exactly the same as what June Moxie did to Guan Qing Han. June Moxie's reaction was almost the same as Guan Qing Han's. He was neither too close nor too far away. Therefore, Dugu Xiaoyi became more and more courageous as she fought. She fought again and again, and the more she suffered, the more ferocious she became. Hence, the cycle of the three of them continued. At noon, the cycle would repeat itself. At night, the cycle would continue, and the cycle would repeat itself again and again. In the end, the soldiers lost interest in watching the show. Damn it, can't the three of you do something more substantial? Aren't you tired of arguing like this all the time? Damn it, even if you're not tired of it, we're tired of watching you. However, there was something else that made everyone feel strange. Most people would wake up in the morning in high spirits, or at least not listless. However, young Master June had a very tired appearance after waking up these past few days. In fact, it seemed as if he hadn't done anything good the entire night. In fact, his face had become somewhat thin after a few days. He had to eat breakfast and rest for a while before he gradually recovered his spirit and became lively again. Everyone was very strange. It seems that June Sunshao doesn't get tired at night. He lives alone. So, how can he be so tired? I don't see him working during the day either. What's going on? Miss Qing Han and Miss Dugu have gone to bed early these days. It can't be them. So, who else could it be? Uncle Dongfang Wenqing had endured for a long time because of this abnormal phenomenon. Finally, he quietly called his nephew to the side and stealthily told him, "Monsieur, young people should know how to restrain themselves. I know that it's the first time you've enjoyed that wonderful feeling, but it's very uncomfortable to have nowhere to vent it. I used to be young, so of course I understand. But you have to restrain yourself for the whole night. You have to do it once every other night. You won't die if you do it once every other night. But don't do it several times a night. It's very satisfying, but it's very harmful to the body. Especially for us martial artists. Moreover, it's not a good thing for our future generations. So, you must restrain yourself." June Moxie's eyes widened. He listened to his uncle's sincere and earnest teachings. He was dumbfounded, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Uncle, you're thinking too much." "I'm not," June Dashao hastily explained. "Oh my God, what's going on?" "What do you mean you're not?" Dongfang Wenqing glared at him, and then softened her breath. She set an example and said, "We're all men. I'm your uncle. How can I not know your pettiness? Why can't I say it? What's there to be embarrassed about? It's normal for a young man to have that kind of need. I'm also an experienced man. I was also young at that time, and I didn't have much self-control. Alas. In short, don't do this kind of thing anymore, okay? I'm doing it for your own good. Don't say no. Just listen and do it." June Dashao's face was full of black lines. He was extremely speechless and depressed. His uncle had set an example for him. What else could he say? What else could he say? We all understand. Young people are always a little angry. Try to control it. Don't make it public. Dongfang Wenqing patted his nephew's shoulder warmly. He recovered his usual solemn manner of a strong master like Shen Xian. He walked out slowly with the air of an uncle. He had a sense of satisfaction, as if he was teaching and educating people. Fortunately, he had discovered it early. His nephew had not yet become addicted to it, so he had hurriedly taught him by example. If it had become a habit in the future, then it would have been really bad, just like himself in the past. Sigh, the past was unbearable to recall. Dongfang Shenxian had a complacent look on his face, but there was also a bit of sadness as he leisurely walked out. Later, Jun Moxie inquired about it and learned from his other two uncles that although this eldest uncle had many wives and concubines, he had no children. He had no descendants and no one to carry on the family line. But the more it was like this, the more concubines he took. The more concubines he took, the less he had. It had become a vicious circle now. It was said that Dongfang Wenqing had 40 to 50 wives and concubines. It was a very terrifying number. Even if he took turns to take care of one wife and concubine every night, it would take about 2 months, so that was it. Jun Moxie secretly chuckled. Then, he started to ponder in his heart. I can use my medical skills and herbs to help my uncle regain his ability to bear children. But, how should I put it? What was more, today this old man judged others by himself. He put such a big hat on me without asking for the reason. It seemed that it would be unreasonable if I didn't take revenge. He was my uncle, so it was impossible for him to take revenge by force. As for other things, well, I'll just wait until I get back to the Dongfang family. I can't rush this matter. Jun Moxie hurriedly returned to his tent as he watched his uncle walk away. Then, he turned his wrist, and a shiny long sword appeared in his hand. This sword was 2 feet long, and 6 inches shorter than the traditional 3 feet long sword. The sword's width was less than 3 inches, and its thickness was moderate. The hilt of the sword didn't have the slightest bit of decoration. In fact, the shape of the sword was simple and unadorned. However, it radiated brilliance in all directions. As soon as this sword was taken out, the temperature in the tent seemed to suddenly drop. It was cold and gloomy. Even though it was noon and the sun was shining brightly, there was a feeling of dusk in the tent. From the body of the sword to the tip, it seemed to be swallowing and spitting out cold flames. In fact, it wasn't shining brightly. It just stayed quietly in Jun Moxie's hand, but it naturally had the aura of a king among soldiers. It made people unconsciously feel that the body of the sword seemed to be shining brightly. Jun Moxie's finger lightly flicked the body of the sword. Almost at the same time, an unusually clear and melodious cry was heard. It was as if a bloodthirsty poisonous dragon that had been sleeping for thousands of years had suddenly woken up from its dream, and was crying out thirstily. The sword's cry suddenly soared into the sky. Within a radius of a few hundred feet, everyone felt their heart palpitate. Countless horses panicked and neighed at the same time. It was as if an ancient demon had suddenly descended among them. It was inexplicably terrifying. Jun Moxie picked up a long knife that was hanging on the wall of the tent. He stretched out the body of the sword and pointed it towards the sky. Then, he gently put the knife down from the sky. Cha, with a soft sound, this long saber that was shining with a cold light naturally split into 2 like tofu the moment it came into contact with the sword edge. It fell to the ground in a dispirited manner. This soft sound was like a sharp knife stabbing into a piece of wood. It was so soft that it was almost inaudible. However, the long knife that had been used for hundreds of battles had already been broken into 2 pieces. Jun Moxie let out a light sigh of relief. He caressed the ridge of the sword and said in a soft voice, "Compared to you, those so-called divine weapons that can cut through iron like mud, what do they count as? You are the real king among soldiers. The Emperor of Swords. The long sword was silent and soundless. 333 long knives, 333 sharp swords, 333 long halberds. A total of 999 weapons were used to create this sword of yours. How much blood do you need to feed yourself? Jun Moxie spoke as if he was talking to a living person, gently and slowly. He knew that this sword could understand him. It could really understand. A treasured knife had a spirit, and a divine weapon had a soul. The long sword trembled slightly. It seemed to not move, but a strange halo extended from the hilt to the tip of the sword. It swam back and stopped at the ridge of the sword, motionless. It was like the soul of a bloodthirsty venomous snake, swam back and forth on the blade of the sword. Jun Moxie carefully used the edge of the sword to gently cut his arm. A stream of blood flowed out and flowed onto the blade of the sword. The long sword turned around, and this stream of blood smeared the entire blade of the sword. Then, it flowed down along the tip of the sword. The blade of the sword was like autumn water, spotless and bright. Jun Moxie did this very slowly, very solemnly, and very pious. Even very nostalgic. With my blood, I nourish my sharp weapon. With my soul, I worship my divine weapon. This was the tradition of the Chinese swordsman for a long time. It was an ancient ritual. Since there were swordsmen in the world, this ritual had been going on for thousands of years. After the rise of hot weapons and the decline of cold weapons, it was on the verge of extinction. But in this different world, at this moment, Jun Moxie used his supreme piety to perform this strange ancient ritual to himself and his sword. He wanted to use this method to express his love for the long sword. He also wanted to use this method to remind himself, no matter where I am, I still have the bloodline of Yan and Huang, a descendant of China. Chapter 404. There was no need to doubt, and there was no room for doubt. The main culprit of the weapon thefts these past few days was Jun Moxie. This was the most obvious thing. Only he could create this kind of unparalleled godly thief reputation. Of course, this so-called obvious is something that only we are clear about. Others don't know. Jun Dashao, the supreme godly thief, would steal every day whenever he had nothing to do. With those methods of his, how could he care about the peaceful world? As long as he could see it with his eyes, it would be easy to grab it with his hands. No, it had already surpassed the level of grabbing. With the growth of Dashao's magical powers, his mental power had already reached a higher level. In the face of those ownerless weapons, as long as he thought about it, he would immediately store them into the Hongjun Pagoda. This method had already reached a godly level. Even if the four great detectives used the most advanced technology to investigate the case, they wouldn't be able to kill a sheep. As for the transforming ordinary iron into rare gold in one's own tent after nightfall, it was nothing more than destroying the corpses and changing one's appearance, nothing more. He believed that no immortal would be so bored as to use the heaven-defying skills of yin-yang escape and 5 elements transformation to steal a few ordinary swords and sabers. Moreover, they were not top-notch divine weapons, but ordinary weapons made of ordinary steel. Therefore, in a sense, the degree of squandering of Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao had definitely risen to an absolute peak that no one had ever reached before. Extremely flashy. Extremely wasteful. After a few nights of hard work and exhaustion, Beekeeper Jun used the power of metal to collect the 999 weapons. Then, he used the power of metal to transform the ordinary iron into a strange metal. Finally, he transformed them into a sword. It could be said that this was the first sword that Jun Moxie had personally refined in this world. And it was also the last sword that he had refined using this extreme method. Because of this sword, his spiritual power had been continuously depleted over 300 times over the past few days and nights. This was an abnormally huge consumption. In the future, Da Xiao might use the method of turning ordinary iron into wondrous metal to forge swords and blades, but he would never pay such a huge price of emptying his spiritual power every time. Even the perseverance of Jun Moxie, the evil monarch, could not bear such a huge consumption. Besides, he didn't think that he would have the courage and time to do so in the future. As his strength continued to rise, the enemies he would have to face in the future would only become stronger and stronger. They would no longer be those small fries of the past. These powerful enemies would never allow him to waste so much time. Although Jun Moxie could hide every time he was exhausted, his family and subordinates might not be able to do so. Any careless mistake could very possibly result in eternal parting with the heavens. Every time, he would directly extract the most essential part of the material from the metal. Jun Moxie pursued the pinnacle of perfection, and this sword was such an existence. For the sake of this sword's birth, Jun Moxie had practically spent the entire day and night steeling it without rest. Then, he would refine it non-stop, and then steal it again. Such a cycle, such frequent use of the power of metal, over and over again, over and over again, and over and over again, and over and over again. The spiritual power in his meridians and dantian was like a reservoir at the top of the mountain. The upper end was blocked, and the lower end was also blocked. It was originally in a static state, but the lower end suddenly opened completely, so the water in the reservoir rushed down and instantly emptied. Then, at the same time when the reservoir became empty, the upper end suddenly opened, and after a very short time, it was filled with water, and so on. Again and again, the cycle became faster and faster, and he became more and more familiar with it. But with the impact of the water, the reservoir's capacity also increased slightly. Even though each increase was very small, but such a frequent number of times caused the reservoir's capacity to become larger and larger. But no matter how much it expanded, it could always be filled in a very short time. Just because he had successfully refined such a sword, Jun Moxie's spiritual power had improved by a lot, and even his own Xian cultivation had risen along with it. According to the Xian continent's standards, he was already close to the Tian Xian intermediate level. Don't think that this was just a small improvement from the beginner level to the intermediate level, but in terms of Xian cultivation, it was a huge matter. Da Xiao had just reached the Tian Xian beginner level a few days ago, and in less than 2 days, he was actually about to break through to the intermediate level. This kind of advancement was simply a big matter that could scare people's teeth off. This was definitely an astonishing speed of advancement that had never been seen since ancient times. Even the legends did not have such a legendary speed. In addition, Da Xiao's control of the power of gold had also become more proficient, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he was extremely familiar with it. Now, Da Xiao was no longer limited to simply extracting materials, but was trying to control the power of gold, trying to shrink a sword by half or even smaller, just to make it a little sharper, a little stronger, or to fuse 3 or 4 weapons into a sword, or a knife. It must be known that it was naturally relatively easy to release one's own magical power in one go, but when it came to controlling it bit by bit, that was an absolute skill. Although Da Xiao could not achieve fine control at the moment, he was constantly studying the power of gold, and developing in the direction of skill. However, Jun Moxie was still very tired after such a long period of consumption. The Hong Jun Pagoda's aura could replenish his physical strength, but it still consumed a lot of his mental strength, and the best way to replenish his mental strength was to sleep. However, the young Master Jun's current achievements couldn't replace sleep. In fact, he would look like a bear if he didn't get enough sleep, and so, of course, the eldest young master received his dear uncle's earnest and heartfelt advice, and even set an example for himself. Jun Moxie did not know whether to be angry or to laugh, but now that he saw this sword, all his negative emotions were instantly sublimated. At this moment, There was nothing else in Da Xiao's eyes other than the sword. This was the first time that Jun Moxie had used the traditional method of Yan Huang to sacrifice a sword. This sword was personally made by himself, without the help of any tools, just made out of thin air. It was like a child that had suddenly been born. It was like a lifelong friend that had reunited after a long time, and would always be by his side from now on. You have my blood in you, I am a descendant of Yan Huang. You will keep an eternal memory for me in this life, and in this life, forever. Jun Moxie looked at the sword with an unusually gentle gaze, his tone filled with longing, melancholy, and nostalgia. His gaze seemed to pass through endless time and space, returning to the place that he loved the most, his gaze still determined. From now on, your name shall be Blood of Yellow Flame. Jun Moxie's tone was solemn, but his gaze was suddenly burning, as if his blood was burning. From now on, in this different world, accompany me to conquer the world, accompany me to dance the winds and clouds. Become the king of evil, and spread the name of Yan Huang. Kill all the evils in this world, one man and one sword, dominate the world. I will use the blood of all enemies in this world to nourish you, to feed you. In this continent, you, the blood of Yellow Flame, will become an eternal legend. Jun Moxie's tone was very low, very serious, very serious. It sounded like he was not murmuring, but issuing a vow. An earth-shattering vow. A vow that would last till the end of time. In the name of Yan Huang. The long sword let out a clear cry, like the roar of a dragon or a tiger. The capital, the Jun residence, was unusually lively during this period of time. Ever since the expedition team left, Princess Raimu would come to report in almost every day, and she would stay for an entire day. After a period of time, the Empress would also come to visit from time to time. Grandpa Jun was well aware of the reason for this, but this matter could not be brought out in the open. So, he simply waved his hand. Since Guan Qing Han was not at home, her courtyard was temporarily given to the Empress and Princess Raimu as their resting place. Every time the Empress came, she would stay in Guan Qing Han's courtyard. She would take out a jade flute and gently play a song. Then, she would quietly sit in the courtyard, not taking a step out of the courtyard. Only when it was time to leave, she would play another song, and then immediately leave, never staying a moment longer. The sound of the flute was originally melancholy, but the sound of the Empress's flute was even more sorrowful, like weeping and complaining, causing those who heard it to shed tears, and those who heard it to feel sad. The Empress's face was very calm, and could even be said to be stupefied. But when she was playing these two songs, her expression was focused, and her face was serious. It was as if she was using all her heart, all her soul, to play these two songs. That kind of tranquil grief would make anyone who saw it feel sad. Even when the Empress was playing, there would sometimes be a kind of despairing gentleness, helpless sadness, in her eyes. Every time the sound of the flute sounded, Yi Gohan, who was recuperating in Jun Moxie's courtyard, would be abnormally quiet. Now, he could get up and even walk a few steps, but his body had suffered too much damage, and his vitality was greatly damaged. His right hand, which was holding the sword, had also been cut off from the shoulder. His exquisite swordsmanship was crippled, and his dantian had exploded. Tian Xian's cultivation was also gone. During this period of time, Yi Gohan had become haggard. From a strong Tian Xian, he had been reduced to a cripple who had lost all his Xian qi. Moreover, he had become a complete cripple. Such a huge gap made Yi Gohan, who was originally a proud and arrogant person, almost go crazy. He had sacrificed for Raimu. Even though he had lost all his cultivation, even though he had become a cripple, he had no regrets, no regrets. He only blamed himself for not dying on the spot, but leaving this crippled body, which was a disgrace to the world. As a proud and arrogant person, he could not accept it in any way, and even once hysterically begged for death. However, no matter how berserk Yi Guhan was, he would immediately become like a well-behaved child as soon as the sound of the flute resounded. He would quietly sit there, and accompany the person next door. They would quietly pass this period of time together, recommend a new book. Knife God, book number 1651770. I never believe in God, because in front of my knife, no one dares to claim to be God. Chapter 405. Every time this happened, Yi Guhan's face would be very complicated: frustration, sadness, loss, and a vague happiness. His gaze was affectionate but persistent, painful yet sweet. His mouth would always silently murmur a name. Although he didn't make any sound, his mouth would always form the same two words. Xiao Xiao. Also, there was a poem that Yi Guhan often muttered. It was the poem that he recited when he was seriously injured and knew that he was going to die. I don't regret this life's deep love, I'm willing to wander alone. Eternal regret for lovers in a dream, I'd rather betray the heavens than you. However, Yi Guhan changed the last two lines to, if the fate in the next life is not over, I'd rather betray the heavens than you. This change was the sublimation of Yi Guhan's soul. He no longer hated, but he hoped for the next life. The next life, this, could also be considered a beautiful wish. The two of them were separated by a wall, but it was as if they were separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, heaven and earth. It was as if this wall was an eternal and huge chasm that could never be crossed. If the fate in the next life is not over, I'd rather betray the heavens than you. Xiao Xiao, these two songs were your favorites when we were together. Now, I'm finally hearing them again. Yi Guhan's tears fell. Uncle Yi, I never knew that mother could use the flute to play songs, and that she could play it so well. Princess Raimu held her cheeks, her eyes a little misty. This is also the first time I've heard mother play the flute. You said that this is the first time you've heard your mother play songs? The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener was interested. Yi Guhan's whole body trembled. He suddenly raised his head, his eyes suddenly emitting light. The light in his eyes was actually a strange satisfaction. That's right. Ever since I was born, I've never seen my mother play with any musical instrument. She also rarely listens to music. I thought my mother didn't like music. Today is really unexpected, Princess Lingmeng said innocently. Yi Guhan smiled from the bottom of his heart. At this moment, he was already satisfied and didn't ask for anything else. When he came, he sang Listening to the Wind, and when he left, he sang Tears of the Horizon. Su, thank you. It turns out that I still have the most beautiful thing in this world, and that is your affection. Thank you. It turns out that I've already obtained the reward that I've been longing for. Everything that I've done is worth it. I'm satisfied, I'm really satisfied. Yi Guhan leaned against the flowering tree. Leaves fluttered above his head. His expression, at that moment, suddenly became strangely tranquil and strangely serene. It was also from this day onwards that Yi Guhan, whose cultivation had been completely crippled and he had been reduced to a cripple, no longer had that desolate expression on his face, no longer did he become hysterical, no longer did he go crazy. Even though the pain was unbearable, he did not let out a single moan. Because at that moment, Yi Guhan finally understood that all my efforts were worth it. I'm no longer lonely, no longer lonely, no longer lonely, no longer lonely, no longer regretful, no longer regretful, because the world of mortals has you. The days passed by one after another. News from Tiannan also came one after another. From that day onwards, His Majesty the Emperor would often visit Jun Tian and chat about old times. As a result, the Jun residence became even livelier. Naturally, the security became even stricter. Every time His Majesty the Emperor came, he would sometimes hear the faint sound of the flute. Every time that happened, His Majesty the Emperor would let out a long sigh. His eyes would blur as he quietly sat upright, sipping tea, listening to the wind. Sometimes there would even be a trace of guilt, and a trace of nostalgia, the entanglement of gratitude and grudges, the impermanence of the world of mortals. Just as the great families began to stir up the inevitable infighting, Grandpa June stroked his beard with an indifferent expression on his face. He watched one good show after another with a smile on his face, feeling as though he was bursting with joy. Grandpa June was in high spirit. Even his favorite drama couldn't compare to this. Watching his old friends and old rivals getting angered to the point where their hands and feet turned ice cold, Grandpa June maintained an indifferent expression on his face. However, his heart was rejoicing in their misfortune. "Damn it, you old fools kept laughing at my grandson. Now you've all tasted the bitterness, haven't you?" Grandpa June was very happy. Originally, he had decided not to go to the imperial court. But now, he would wander around the imperial court every day. Almost everyone in the imperial court was frowning, but Grandpa June's hearty laughter never stopped. As for sarcasm and ridicule, he would casually come out of his mouth. As a result, when these old men saw June Jean Tian rejoicing in their misfortune, their hearts itched with hatred. However, they couldn't do anything to this old man, who asked their descendants to be so troublesome. There was even one time when Grandpa June saw the Murong family's old master, Murong Fengyun, angry to the point that his eyes and nose were crooked. "I say, old Murong, why are you so angry, you old thief? What is there to be angry about? The direct descendants are all fighting for the position of family head. This is a good sign. What is it called?" "That's right, it's called a virtuous cycle." This shows that the Murong family is thriving. This shows that they have the heart to improve themselves. They have the spirit to strive forward. If you ask me, you old bastard, you should be happy. This old man is really envious of you. Look at me, I'm already so old, but I'm still bitterly supporting the June family. If Wu Yi or Mo Xie wanted to usurp my position, this old man would definitely raise both hands and feet in approval. Right now, I'm only thinking, why haven't they come to usurp my position? They should hurry up and usurp my position so that I can retire and rest. Look at you, look at you. What is this called, You're about to enter your coffin, but you're still so attached to the family's position. You should also give the younger generation a chance. Don't be so stubborn. These eccentric words caused Grandpa Murong to tremble with anger. His eyes stared blankly, and his hands and feet turned ice cold. Even the white beard on his chin trembled, as if it was dancing. "Old bastard June, it's easy for you to stand and talk. What else do you know apart from taking pleasure in other people's misfortune? Your June family only has a single strand of hair. What's there to fight over? But this old man here has more than 30 strands. Why don't you give it a try?" "Ha ha ha. Old bastard Murong, you really have a lot of hair. You actually have more than 30 strands. I admire you." June Jean Tian laughed until his eyebrows could not be seen. He was overjoyed. "Old bastard Murong, didn't you always run over to show off to this old man every time you had a grandson? Do you still remember what you said 3 years ago? You old bastard, in front of everyone you said, 'This old man's family is thriving. This old man's grandson has 33 guns.'" June Jean Tian spat and said, "Now you're being annoyed by your 33 guns, right? Serves you right. Damn it. Look at those 30 or so guns of yours. Each and every one of them is a spearhead made of wax. Good to look at but useless." Grandpa June looked disdainfully at the other old men. He pointed his finger at them one by one and laughed loudly. "You and you humph, you used to brag in front of this old man about your children's reproductive ability. Every time you gave birth to a child, you would come to this old man to ask for money. After asking for money, you would even make sarcastic remarks about this old man. How about now? What's wrong? All of you are dead, right? All of you are withered, right? Why aren't you showing off? Ha ha ha. This old man's heart is really happy. This old man's grandson only has one gun. He can win 10, he can win 100, ah ha ha. Grandpa June, who had lost his sense of measure and started to put on a show, incurred the wrath of the crowd. 7 or 8 old men with white beards rushed forward with red eyes. It was as if they were about to gang up on him. Grandpa June laughed loudly and fled. Although he had fled, he had finally vented the anger that he had been holding in for decades. It was comfortable and delightful. However, Grandpa June was happy too early. Extreme joy is often accompanied by sorrow. The storm that followed was something that he had never expected. Not even in his wildest dreams could he have imagined that his grandson, whom he had been so proud of, who could fight against 100 spears with a single spear, would immediately poke such a huge hole in his own spear. Grandpa June was flushed with success. He hummed a little tune as he returned home. What greeted him was a letter sent by an eagle. After it was opened, the smile on Grandpa June's face froze before it could fade away. His mouth suddenly opened wide like a catfish on the verge of dying of thirst. "Oh, my mother! How could this be?" Grandpa June only managed to utter those words after a long while. His eyes were as big as copper bells as he sat down, smashing the rosewood chair into pieces. In the end, his buttocks landed on the ground, but he was still oblivious to what had happened. "My dear grandson, you're really a troublesome ancestor. This kind of thing could have happened half a year later, or even 2 or 3 months later. Why did it have to happen at such a critical time? I'm going to be laughed at by those old farts. Where should I put my old face? I've just offended all those old farts. I've completely offended them." Grandpa June was somewhat shocked. He had called out mother and grandson. He was truly moved. However, Grandpa June was still worried about losing face in front of his old friends. His nerves were really thick. "Master, what happened to you? Could it be the third general and the young master? Did something happen? Didn't we just receive news that they had safely passed the test and will be returning soon?" Old Pang was shocked and hurried over to help him up. "What happened? Something big happened." Grandpa June trembled as he stood up. He let out a long sigh and suddenly roared, "This is absurd!" He raised his hand and smashed the table in front of him. Old Pang's complexion changed. A murderous aura emanated from his body as he gritted his teeth and asked, "Could it be the third general and the young master? Did something happen to them?" June Jean Tian slowly stood up. After the initial shock, Grandpa June gradually regained his usual calmness. He frowned and slowly paced back and forth. Finally, he sighed softly and said, "You will understand after you read this." He handed over the report in his hand. Old Pang took a look and suddenly cried out in alarm. The more he read, the wider his eyes became, and the wider his mouth became. Suddenly, a cha sound was heard, followed by a cry of pain. His jaw had been dislocated. Such an unimaginable thing was unheard of and unseen since ancient times. It was simply unimaginable. Old Pang hurriedly put his lower jaw back on. He was gasping in pain, but he couldn't help but laugh out loud. It was just too funny. Chapter 406. This old man is naturally addressing you as my in-law. Do you think I'm addressing anyone else? Apart from you, how many people in the Tianxiang city are qualified to marry this old man? Grandpa June's expression was very puzzled, as if saying, "Are you an idiot? Bah! When did I become in-laws with you? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? Your June family only has one son and one grandson. The son is crippled and the grandson is a debauchee. You want to claim kinship with me? You're delusional." Dugu Zongheng's facial muscles twitched. An ominous glint flashed in his eyes. If Grandpa June had heard Dugu Zongheng's words on any other day, especially the words crippled, he would have immediately flown into a rage. In fact, he might have even come to teach Dugu Zongheng a lesson. But now, unexpectedly, Grandpa June did not get angry at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "In-law, you are talking about an outsider. It may not have been like this in the past, but now it is impossible even if you want to deny it. Come, listen to me carefully. This matter is actually very simple. It is just one sentence: what is done is done. Do you understand what I mean? Now let's talk about the details. That day it was like this. Woody, you must also listen. After all, Woody is also an in-law. You're the most direct in-law." Dugu Zongheng's face turned green the moment he heard the words, cooked rice. Then, he heard the words, direct in-law. His old face turned even more blue. I suddenly remembered that the officers and soldiers in the camp still have something to discuss with me. I need to go and deal with it. Delaying military affairs is a serious crime. It's a major matter that involves dozens of lives. Human lives are at stake, and I can't delay it. I have to go. The more Dugu Woody listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. So, he immediately thought of one of the 36 stratagems to avoid the limelight. That reason was also very overbearing. It was a matter of dozens of people's lives. "You brat, stop right there." Dugu Zongheng's face had turned completely blue. He glared at him and roared. "I'll break your legs if you dare to leave before I explain things clearly. If you shout again, I'll give you a discount." Dugu Woody had just turned around. He didn't even dare to squeak, let alone move. He maintained his posture of taking a step forward. His complexion was alternating between red and white. It was as if he was having diarrhea when someone suddenly blocked his way to the toilet. His forehead was dripping with sweat. "Jun Jean Tian, please." Dugu Zongheng tilted his head and looked at Grandpa June. Then, he raised his hand in a gesture of respect. The meaning was clear. "Don't say anything here. Let's go inside and talk behind closed doors. You brats wait here. No one is allowed to leave. If anyone dares to approach in an attempt to eavesdrop on military secrets, kill them." Grandpa June turned around and gave the order. Hearing Grandpa June's order, Grandpa Dugu also felt that something was amiss. So, he followed suit and ordered his own bodyguards to stand guard. The bodyguards of both families complied in unison, and quickly spread out to several key positions. Grandpa June took a step forward and followed behind Dugu Zongheng with large strides after finishing his preparations. Great General Dugu Woody slowly followed behind them. The bad feeling in his heart was becoming more and more obvious. What's done is done. It can't be true, right? Good heavens! My dear daughter, don't tell me that you've pushed me into a pit of fire. Old man June, if you have something to say, then say it. If you have something to fart, then say it. Don't beat around the bush. Don't talk nonsense. Dugu Zongheng's complexion had already turned black. He appeared very impatient. He looked at his son with an increasingly unkind expression. Dugu Woody didn't have the usual air of a great general. He was extremely restrained as he sat on one side. In fact, he looked like a bullied wife. His tall and sturdy body seemed as if it wanted to shrink into the ground. He was constantly wiping his sweat. It was already early winter in Tianxiang. But Great General Dugu seemed to be in the middle of summer. "Ah, your family's granddaughter, Xiao Yi. He, that girl is a good girl. This time in the southern heaven city, she." Jun Jean Tian didn't hide anything. However, he was interrupted by Dugu Zongheng. "Stop." Dugu Zongheng raised his hand. He then turned around to look at Dugu Woody. Then, he fiercely asked, "Didn't you say that Xiao Yi is in the imperial palace with Princess Raimu? How did she come to the southern heaven city? Is this old man trying to trick me?" Old man Dugu had decades of experience, so he could tell that Grandpa June was telling the truth. But, he still held on to some hope. After all, Grandpa June's words of, "what's done is done," were too shocking. That. More sweat appeared on Dugu Woody's forehead. In fact, it seemed as if it was flowing unceasingly. In fact, it had almost blocked his eyes. He kept on wiping his sweat. His dark complexion alternated between red and white. He was in an extremely sorry state. This and that, he couldn't even speak a complete sentence. In fact, he had almost caught up to Duanmu fried rice. General Dugu had only found out that Dugu Xiaoyi had secretly gone to the southern heaven city with Guan Qing Han a few days after she had left. But, wouldn't he have been skinned alive if his grandfather had found out about this? Therefore, Dugu Wudi had only arranged for his 3 nephews to look after his daughter. And he had prayed to God that nothing bad would happen to her. Then, he had prayed day and night that this young lady wouldn't cause any trouble, and that she would quickly come back. However, it seemed that things had turned out contrary to his wishes. His precious daughter must have caused a lot of trouble over there. It was very clear from Jun Zhantian's expression. Dugu Zongheng saw that his son wasn't saying anything. He only knew how to wipe his sweat. So, he knew that there was no hope. So, he snorted angrily and said, "I'm old. I'm really old. Everyone in the family thinks that I'm an old blind man now. Father this, that." Dugu Wudi opened his mouth and explained with great difficulty. But, he couldn't squeeze out even half a word after a long time. "You bastard! Shut your mouth. I'll break your legs if you speak any louder," Dugu Zongheng shouted. Then, he turned to Jun Zhantian and said, "Elder Jun, you continue. You mustn't miss a single detail. Ah, you also know that Qing Han's daughter has a relationship with our Jun family." Xiao Yi became anxious when she saw that Qing Han was no longer Mo Xie's sister-in-law. She also loves Mo Xie very much. So, she thought of a way to get some aphrodisiac from one of the family's guards. It wasn't a lot. It was only 1 packet. She didn't waste any of it. So, she gave it all to Mo Xie. So, how could Mo Xie be on guard against her? Naturally, she drank it all without spoiling it. But she couldn't handle it alone. At the most critical moment, Guan Qing Han, that girl, was too kind. She was afraid that something would happen to them and went to look for them. Haha, in the end. Alas, she made a big mistake. That's how it happened. Old Dugu, you tell me. Aren't we relatives by marriage now? Your granddaughter took the initiative. Bah. It doesn't matter who took the initiative. In any case, the rice is cooked. So, that brat, Mo Xie, will definitely take responsibility. Jun Zhantian stroked his beard. He had deliberately made some of the less important points vague. He had emphasized that Jun Dashao would take responsibility, especially when Jun Zhantian had assumed the appearance of a victim. He couldn't help but sigh. In fact, everything that old man Jun had said was the truth. However, he had deliberately misled them. For example, but she couldn't handle it alone. So, at the most critical moment, those who knew the truth would naturally understand that nothing had happened to Dugu Xiaoyi. She certainly couldn't handle Jun Dashao at that time. But nothing had happened. However, those who didn't know the truth would think too much. Especially those 2 men, Dugu Zongheng and Dugu Wudi, had naturally thought of something. Jun Moxie had been drugged with so many aphrodisiacs. So, a silly little girl like Dugu Xiaoyi wouldn't have been able to handle it. So, she wouldn't have been able to handle it. So, this thought had unconsciously formed a fixed pattern of thinking. Jun Moxie and Dugu Xiaoyi had already done that thing. Well, Dugu Xiaoyi couldn't handle it. At the most critical moment, Guan Qing Han had appeared and saved Dugu Xiaoyi's life. She had saved Dugu Xiaoyi's life. But she had also sacrificed herself. This was the most logical deduction. Since Dugu Xiaoyi had drugged Jun Moxie, it meant that she had already decided to cut off all means of retreat. So, why would she run away? Dugu Zongheng and Dugu Wudi's eyes widened as Jun Zhantian narrated. The sound of their breathing became louder and louder. Eventually, their throats began to emit huff sounds. Even after Jun Zhantian had finished speaking for a long time, The father and son duo were still staring at each other with their eyes wide open. Jun Tian knew that his objective had been achieved. So, he no longer paid attention to them. He picked up his teacup and calmly sipped his tea. "You're really infuriating me." Unexpectedly, the first one to jump up in anger was the great General Dugu Wu Di. He had already become completely listless a moment ago. He could be seen dancing with joy. In fact, he had jumped 30 feet high. He was so angry that his entire face had changed shape. Jun Moxie, that little bastard. He actually dared to do such a despicable thing. I won't forgive him. I want to dismember his body into 10,000 pieces. I want to castrate him and then castrate him. He had said "I" for a long time. But he hadn't even finished speaking when a powerful slap landed on his head. The slap had sent him crashing to the ground. He had landed on his back like a gold ingot. You bastard! What's your name? What's your mother's name? What did I just say? If you speak again, I'll break your legs. My words are nothing but farts. Chapter 407. Today's third update. Fourth update in progress. You raised a good daughter. Duguzong Hung is truly unfortunate. I raised a bunch of vile creatures like you. You deceived me, didn't you? Now that something has finally happened, you're happy. You're happy. Duguzong Hung jumped up. He was like a starving wild wolf that was frantically circling around in a cage. However, he couldn't find anything after circling around twice. So, he suddenly shouted like a thunderclap, "This old man is furious." He jumped up and ferociously kicked Dugu Wudi's body. This kick was extremely powerful. Bang! General Dugu Wudi's majestic body smashed through the wall and flew out. Then, he landed in the courtyard far away and prostrated himself on the ground. The Jun family's guards and the Dugu family's guards were old acquaintances. So, these two groups of people were on high alert at this moment. After all, the two old men had issued a strict order that anyone who rashly approached in order to eavesdrop on military secrets would be killed on the spot. This wasn't a joke. Suddenly, there was a whistling sound of wind. Everyone thought that someone was trying to eavesdrop on military secret. But, when they looked up, they saw General Dugu's exceptionally tall and sturdy body fall between the two groups of people with a thump sound. He cut an extremely sorry figure. This unforeseen event couldn't help but leave everyone's jaws wide open in surprise. Everyone still hadn't figured out what was going on when they suddenly heard the sound of wind. Dugu Wudi's mouth was crooked and his eyes were slanted. He madly kicked General Dugu's body. It could be seen that he didn't show the slightest bit of mercy. He madly cursed as he kicked General Dugu. "I'll fu *k your mother. I'll fu *k your mother. I'll fu *k your grandmother. I'll fu *k your mother." Dugu Wudi appeared to be a seasoned veteran. He covered his face with one of his arms, while the other covered his crotch. His body was curled up into a ball and he shouted, "Well done! Hit him fiercely. Don't hold back. The more you hit him, the better. But I'm so angry. I'm so angry. Fu *k." The two guards stood to one side in a daze. Their eyebrows were twitching crazily. They didn't know what was going on. What the hell is going on? When had they ever seen a general who could do whatever he wanted in the entire empire being beaten up like this? Not to mention the Jun family's guards, even the Dugu family's guards had never seen such a thing before. This was simply big news. It was too surprising. Just as the guards were poking their heads out to look around, their bellies full of gossip, they heard the sound of clothes flapping in the air. Jun Tian rushed over and suddenly shouted like a clap of thunder, "Why are you still crowding around? All of you, scram! Don't you know this is a military secret? Whoever pokes their head around and leaks the news, I'll exterminate their 9 generations." "What? Another military secret? What was going on? Forget it, this is a secret between the higher-ups. Us small fries better not get involved. With a loud boom, the guards of the two families scattered like birds and beasts. Duguzong Huang wasn't willing to stop. His fists were like heavy hammers, and his legs were like meteors. He was beating them to his heart's content, and his spittle was splattering everywhere. However, Dugu Wu Di wasn't someone to be trifled with. Jun Zhan Tian narrowed his eyes as he watched the father and son fight. Both of them were shouting themselves hoarse and seemed to be very energetic. All right. I say, old Dugu, that's enough. You'll get sick if you continue to beat him. Besides, you can *ck his mother. That's perfectly justifiable. But, his grandmother, she's so old that she doesn't even look like a proper person. Moreover, you're overstepping your seniority. Grandpa Jun saw that the beating was almost over, so he spoke up to mediate. It wasn't that he didn't want to mediate earlier, but the father and son needed to vent their anger. Otherwise, it would be hard to say what would happen with Duguzong Heng's temper. However, his words of persuasion seemed to have added fuel to the fire. What's going on? Are you trying to confiscate the family's property? Or are you trying to rebel? Do you still want to live? A sharp, stern, and dignified voice suddenly rang out. It was followed by a majestic army of women coming from the direction of the inner courtyard. The leader of this army was the old lady. She had a stout look on her face, and her entire body was graceful and rich. She was Duguzong Heng's wife. She was a first-class madam of the empire. Old Lady Dugu. The army of women behind her were Dugu Wudi's wives and concubines. There were no less than 7 or 8 of them. They were distressed to see the great General Dugu being beaten so miserably by his father. However, they didn't dare to step forward to mediate because of the old man Dugu's power. They didn't even dare to show concern for their husband. Therefore, they couldn't help but look at the old lady for help. What's going on? The old lady heavily slammed her walking stick on the ground. She angrily shouted, "What's the big deal? Do you have to do this? You actually beat him up to this state? Don't you know how to hold back?" She then turned her sharp eyes towards Grandpa Jun. "You old scoundrel. You didn't say anything, nor did you try to persuade him. Instead, you added fuel to the fire. Your sarcastic words are even more disgraceful. I'll settle this account with you later. The old lady Dugu is a woman who doesn't lose to men." "You're still asking what's going on?" Duguzong Heng finally stopped when he saw that his wife had arrived. However, he couldn't help but ruthlessly kick his son's buttocks before stopping. He was seething with anger. This unfilial son. He really angers this old man to death. Don't stop me today. It's good enough that I don't beat him to death. Even if I beat him to death, I'll still be able to get some peace and quiet. Even if I don't beat him to death, I'll at least break this kid's dog legs. That's how he deceives me. The other ladies saw that Grandpa Jun had finally stopped after being persuaded by the old lady. So, they immediately swarmed forward. Their eyes were brimming with tears like raindrops pear blossoms. They hurriedly helped Dugu Wu Di up. The great General Dugu's face was swollen. His clothes were in tatters. He looked like a pig's head. Suddenly, a noble and graceful lady cried out in alarm. She was sent flying and fell heavily to the ground. She cried out in pain. She was almost unable to breathe. Tears flowed down her face. Her face was full of astonishment, grievance, and bewilderment. She was the great General Dugu's legal wife, Dugu Xiaoyi's mother bastard. "What's the matter with you? Have you lost your mind?" The old lady Dugu hit Dugu Wudi's shoulder with her walking stick. She angrily said, "You took out your anger on your wife after being beaten by your father? Are you still a man?" Dugu Wu Di crawled up. His anger soared to the heavens. "Mother, don't worry about this. This is all because of this stinky woman. She gave birth to a good daughter. Now she has caused such a big scandal. Even if I beat her to death, it would be considered a light punishment. It wouldn't be enough to appease my hatred. General Dugu was still full of energy even though he had been beaten up. His movements were still vigorous. It seemed that a father would beat his son no matter how much he beat him. Xiao Yi? What happened to Xiao Yi? All the women suddenly became nervous. The Dugu family only had one daughter. So, everyone loved and cherished her like a precious pearl. So, they would naturally talk about Dugu Xiaoyi when they mentioned their daughter. General Dugu was suddenly surrounded by a group of women. My lord, what happened to Xiaoyi? What happened? Tell me quickly. Lady Dugu didn't care about the pain in her body. She had thrown her previous grievances to the highest heavens. So, she hurriedly crawled up and asked. The old Lady Dugu became even more nervous. Xiaoyi, what happened to my obedient granddaughter? Dugu Zongheng looked up to the sky and sighed. General Dugu's mouth was crooked. Then, both of them said in a sorrowful tone, Alas! Misfortune befalls our family. Grandpa Jun touched his nose. Then, he moved forward and cupped his hands towards the old Lady Dugu. Then, he laughed dryly and said, I say, that in-law, hee in-law, old Jun greets you. The old Lady Dugu didn't even look at Grandpa Jun. So, when she heard the word in-law, she almost choked and coughed violently. Jun Zhan Tian, you old bastard! You, what did that scum of a grandson of yours do to my precious granddaughter? Old Madame Dugu was a shrewd old woman. When Jun Zhan Tian addressed her as Madame, she understood the meaning behind her words and immediately thought of this. The power of the words in-law was undoubtedly enormous. For a moment, 7 or 8 pairs of eyes of all the women present stared at Grandpa Jun's face like a dozen searchlights. Grandpa Jun's expression didn't change in the face of thousands of soldiers. He wasn't afraid of the Dugu father and son. But, he felt his scalp tingle when he saw this group of women. He secretly admired them in his heart. I feel dizzy just looking at them. Dugu Wudi has to deal with every single one of them. His body is really good. He's almost as good as I was back then. Grandpa Jun coughed a few times before he finally said, In-law, you must speak carefully. This time, my grandson didn't do anything to your granddaughter. Instead, it was your granddaughter who did something to my grandson. Xiao Yi was the one who lit the fire and cooked the rice. This is a serious matter. So, you must clearly understand what's going on before you speak. The old Lady Dugu's body couldn't help but sway as she heard these words. The old lady had experienced many things in her life. Her face suddenly turned cold. Bring me all the information about the southern heaven city. Madame Dugu cautiously looked at her mother-in-law and said in a low voice, I've read every single letter from the southern heaven city. But, not a single word mentioned Xiao Yi. These words were reasonable. The Dugu family's 3 youngsters must have found out about this incident in the southern heaven city. But, they wouldn't have dared to reveal this matter to their family even if they had the courage to do so. After all, everyone wanted to drag this matter out. So, who would dare to take the initiative to poke this hornet's nest? Only report the good news and not the bad news. Those brothers are planning to slip away as soon as they return to Tianxiang. Or I'll go to the border and hide as far as I can. This matter has nothing to do with me. At least, it's not directly related to me. Old man Dugu flew into a rage. Good. It turns out that your entire family knows that that damned girl has gone to the southern heaven city. But you've kept it from me. It turns out that this old man is an outsider. You're a family. You. Good. Bullsh *T outsider. Take back your complaints. Wait until there's no one around before you vent your tantrum. Who else would I hide it from if not you? The old Lady Dugu bluntly retorted. Hurry up and tell me everything. I want to know how I've become old man Jun's in-law. Chapter 408. Today's explosive 4th chapter has been delivered. 4,000 characters. Both father and son turned their heads away when they heard the old lady's question. In fact, neither of them dared to answer her. Speak, the old lady pointed her walking stick at Dugawudi. Dugawudi hadn't even had the time to speak. He was trembling with anger as he thought about that matter. He took a few deep breaths and suppressed the anger in his heart. Then, he started to speak. He hadn't even finished speaking when he said, "That sly girl was bewitched. She asked for 100 kilograms of aphrodisiac from the guards, and used it on June Moxie." The old lady had already guessed what was going to happen. So, her body swayed, and her walking stick fell from her hand with a bang. Her body was on the verge of collapsing. Dugawudi and his wives hastily rushed forward to hug her, and repeatedly called out to her. What a sin! The old lady finally recovered. Tears streamed down her face as soon as she opened her mouth. She didn't doubt the authenticity of this matter. After all, Duguxiao's temperament and her feelings for June Sunshao made this matter entirely possible. Taking 10,000 steps back, with June Zhantian's status, there was no way he would lie about such a matter. Moreover, the army was about to return. Even if June Zhantian were to disregard his old face and lie, how long could such an undeniable lie last? Wouldn't he be the laughing-stock of the world? Besides, Duguxiao had always had a good impression of that debauchee of the June family. And this wasn't a secret in the Dugu family, however. The most important issue wasn't over yet. So, General Dugu braced himself and finished the second half of his story. In fact, there wasn't much to say about the details after that. But, the most important thing was that Guan Qinghan was involved in this matter. The complexions of all the women became heavy for a moment. What do you plan to do? The old lady's face sank as she looked at Dugu Zongheng and Dugawudi. What else can I do? In any case, I will never agree to this. June Moxie was a hedonistic playboy by nature. He was unbearably stubborn and mischievous. Normally, he would engage in fights with chickens and dogs. He did not attend to his proper duties. He was a true prodigal. How could Xiao Yi marry this fellow? If I were to marry him, wouldn't I be wronged for the rest of my life? Dugawudi said angrily. When that brat comes back, I will castrate him. Let's do it. Bullshit. Now that something like this has happened, how can Xiao Yi marry someone else? The old lady Dugu was angry and gloomy at the same time. You actually want to castrate him? You bastard! How can you be so shameless? How dare you have such a thought? Humph! General Dugu really knows how to talk. Castrate? Hee, invincible Dugu, I'll give you that right, but do you dare? June Zhantian slanted his eyes at Dugawudi. He crossed his arms and snorted twice. This old man's grandson has been humble and courteous since he was a child. He's refined, handsome, and talented. How could you say that he's so unbearable? I really don't know whether you're blind or that girl Xiao Yi is blind. June Zhantian, you have the nerve to say that. The old lady Dugu looked at June Zhantian with disdain. You can say such words with that grandson of yours, and you don't even blush? What does a little girl know? She's already been fooled by a few honeyed words. Old sister-in-law, you have to speak with a conscience. That brat Mo Xie has never taken the initiative to look for that girl Xiao Yi. It's always that girl who has rushed to look for Mo Xie. This is something that everyone knows. This old man is speaking the truth, right? I heard that when Mo Xie opened the aristocratic hall, someone said something like, "If I really don't have money, then I'll use my daughter to pay the debt. Then, I'll take that brat as my son-in-law to pay the debt." Old man Dugu said in a slow and unhurried manner. The old lady Dugu's eyes immediately locked onto her son. Invincible Dugu, you bastard, did you say such a thing? General Dugu was completely dumbfounded. But how could he dare to deny under the pressure of his mother? I was pushed around by that brat at that time. So, I said it in passing. No one took it seriously. Bah, no one took it seriously, and you still have the nerve to say it? The old lady Dugu didn't know what to say for a moment. Old Man Dugu saw that he had gained the upper hand, and immediately followed up with another attack. Old sister-in-law, as the saying goes, a good man doesn't fight with a woman. I won't argue with you about the past. Anything I say now is meaningless. The biggest problem at present is that, cough cough, the two of them are already dry like firewood on a raging fire. I've come here to ask for your opinion, that's all. Grandpa June sneered. Then, he quickly changed the topic and said, let's put it bluntly. If your Dugu family insists on not marrying off your daughter, then our June family may not necessarily want to marry your daughter. Besides, we may not be willing to marry even if you don't want to. If Emosie didn't have any objections, then why would he need your granddaughter's aphrodisiac? Three-legged toads are very rare in this world. But two-legged women are a dime a dozen. The Emperor's Princess Raimu runs to my house every day. And your Dugu family isn't the only one with a daughter in the capital. Becoming the prince's son-in-law would be considered as a relative of the emperor. Wouldn't it be better than becoming a son-in-law of the Dugu family? What's more, there's also Qinghan. That girl has suffered a lot, an undeserved calamity. Grandpa June was brimming with confidence. Moreover, he had been angered by Duguwudi's words. So, his words were very impolite. In fact, he was just short of cursing out loud. However, the effect of his words wasn't that much different from cursing out loud. I've come to you today to ask you what you plan to do about this matter. Secondly, your granddaughter's actions have implicated Emosie and Guan Qinghan. Qinghan's engagement with our June family has been annulled. She has even become Wu Yi's adopted daughter. But only a few people know about this matter. So, she is still the June family's eldest granddaughter-in-law in the eyes of outsiders. At least, it's only in name. So, we can't hide this matter any longer. So, we must find a way to solve it. Moreover, this matter involves Uncle E and sister-in-law. This is a huge scandal. Even if your the Dugu family doesn't want to marry off your daughter, you must give me an explanation for this matter. Thirdly, if your the Dugu family wishes to stay out of this matter, then that's not a problem. However, as the saying goes, money makes the world go round. As long as you use a large amount of money, I believe that this matter can be settled. So, you must quickly hand over those 90 million taels of silver to me. This matter cannot be delayed any further. Grandpa June spoke hurriedly and quickly, enunciating each and every word clearly, leaving the men and women of the Dugu family dumbfounded. June Jean Tian's words may have been unpleasant to hear, but they had hit the nail on the head. Everyone had been concerned about Dugu Xiaoyi. But they had neglected the relationship between June Moxie and Guan Qinghan. In the end, this was the main event. You, Dugu Xiaoyi, brought this upon yourself. But June Dashao and Guan Qinghan are the real victims. If this matter were to blow up, the Dugu family would definitely not be able to stay out of it. After all, this matter was caused by Dugu Xiaoyi. The court would certainly use the matter of Uncle Ling and sister-in-law to make an issue out of it. Even if they knew that Dugu Xiaoyi's matter was involved, they would still be wise not to mention it. After all, those people wouldn't have the guts to provoke two military tycoons at the same time. But, if the June family were to be forced into a corner, and the June family would directly announce to the whole world that Dugu Xiaoyi had drugged Dugu Xiaoyi, then, even if they didn't want to marry off their daughter, they wouldn't be able to do it. The young lady of a big family had actually done something like cooked rice with a man. That would be a huge joke and a huge scandal. Moreover, Dugu Xiaoyi had actually drugged Dugu Xiaoyi in order to cook rice. This was a despicable method that only a perverted thief would use. The old lady Dugu suddenly flew into a rage as she thought of this. Why would the family's bodyguards have aphrodisiac on them? These bodyguards are very loyal. They were selected to go to the southern heaven city. But they were responsible for protecting the family's inner courtyard. So, why would they have aphrodisiac on them? What do they want? Duguzong Hung and Duguwudi shuddered when they heard this. Their expressions suddenly turned serious and unsightly. Duguwudi's hawk-like gaze swept over the First Lady and the 7 concubines. His gaze was as cold as a knife. Cough cough. I heard that the girl's drug is meant for men, cough cough cough. I heard that the bodyguard's body, cough cough, has some problems, cough cough cough, he can't do it. Grandpa June felt somewhat embarrassed, but he had no choice but to stand up and explain. It was very likely that there would be bloodshed if he didn't explain things clearly, so that's how it is. The 2 bear-like men's gazes immediately softened. The group of women heaved a sigh of relief. Their faces had become sweaty due to the nervousness they had felt a moment ago. They wouldn't be able to raise their heads in the future if they were to be branded with such a stigma. Even being suspected would be a very shameful matter. This matter didn't set off any big waves, but Jun Zhantian's words were very deadly. The old lady and Duguzong Hung nearly fainted after listening to Jun Zhantian's 3 objectives. Duguzong Hung was suddenly reminded of a sad matter. He suddenly rushed over in a rage, grabbed Duguwudi and gave him a beating. You son of a bitch! You have nothing better to do. You dragged this old man into a debt of 90 million. And your daughter is even better. She has directly caused a huge commotion in the world. I will beat you to death, you son of a bitch! Stop! Grandpa June shouted. You old bastard, don't even think of putting on an act in front of me. Speak frankly. What should we do about this matter? It's only a matter of a few words. I am in a hurry to arrange a countermeasure. I have already issued a gag order in the southern Heaven City. But I reckon that all the great families have already received the news. And His Majesty has already known about it. I'm King under pressure right now. And you two are still bickering with each other. Don't you know that time is precious? And you're still putting on a show? It's fine to postpone the marriage for the time being. But this matter. Our 2 families have never joined hands before. But we must make an exception this time. Your June family's reputation can't afford to be tarnished no matter what. And our Xiao Yi's reputation can't be tarnished either. Old Lady Dugu made a prompt decision. Reputation? What reputation do I have now? Duguzong Heng's chest heaved up and down in anger. You took the initiative to drug someone. What reputation do you have? His carrot-thick finger pointed at Duguwudi and his daughters-in-law. He couldn't help but point at them. You raised a good daughter. You raised a good daughter. You've made a fool out of yourself. You're a dignified young lady of a noble family. And you've done such a shameful thing. This really infuriates this old man. Duguwudi and his wives lowered their heads as they listened to the lecture. Everyone was muttering in their hearts, Isn't it because you spoiled her? You flew into a rage when we spoke a little louder. And there's no need to talk about disciplining her. You've spoiled her to this extent. And you have to bear 90% of the responsibility. But they could only think about it in their hearts. Who would dare to say it out loud? Wouldn't that be asking for their lives? In that case, our 2 families must make preparations. You must know that the imperial censors of the imperial court can talk a living person to death. Moreover, there's no point in arguing over such a clear matter. I'll be in the dark, and you'll be out in the open. We must work together in one fell swoop. Otherwise, the consequences for both our families will be unimaginable. Grandpa June's words were serious. But he felt relieved in his heart. He had finally managed to swindle this family of troublemakers to his side. It hadn't been easy. But victory was already in his grasp. The alliance of 2 military families was unprecedentedly powerful. How could the rotten scholars of the world dare to resist? Old June. Old June is right. Our 2 families must work together to get through this crisis. As for the matter of marriage, it won't be too late to consider it slowly. Hey, slow down. The old lady had only spoken half of her sentence when she suddenly changed her tone. Slowly discuss it? No. The matter of marriage must be settled as soon as possible. It's better to be safe than sorry. What if that little girl becomes pregnant after this? What should we do then? It can't be, right? It can't be so coincidental, right? Duguzong Hung and Duguwu Di looked at each other in dismay. They scratched their heads in uncertainty. Duguwu Di opened his mouth wide. Mother, you're worrying too much. How could such an unreliable thing happen once? Old June would have been overjoyed if the firepower had been so strong. Moreover, Xiao Yi is still young. She's only 16 this year. It's still too early. You two pigheads! The old lady cursed. A young man and a young woman have their first taste. Do you think that they'll be idling along the way? It'll take them 1 or 2 months to reach the capital. You bastards! Let's see what you two bastards will say if she accidentally reveals her pregnancy. Besides, we know the June family well. That child, Emosia, had a bad reputation a few years ago. But I heard that he's already changed for the better. Moreover, he's become the disciple of an otherworldly expert. It can't be considered as a disgrace to Xiao Yi. The old lady finished speaking in one breath. Her face was full of worry. The eyes of the madams suddenly revealed traces of shame when they heard this. But their complexions also turned deathly pale. This kind of thing wasn't impossible. Crap! Duguwu Di and Duguzong Hung exclaimed in unison. They were dumbstruck. The more Jun Zhan Tian listened, the more pleased he became. His eyebrows were full of smiles. Humph, if that's the case, then this matter isn't entirely a bad thing. Chapter 409. There was an inconspicuous small town on the official road from Tiannan to Tianxiang. It was called Ivory Town. There were only a few hundred households in the entire Ivory Town. However, the tea house outside the town was particularly lively today. That was because a group of dignified, white-clothed people were sitting in a circle. They were looking towards the south from time to time. There were quite a few of them, and they were all dressed neatly and uniformly. Everyone wore clothes as white as snow. Such a group of people should have been more lively, but their faces were as cold as ice. Coupled with their snow-like white clothes, they could really freeze people to death. The tea-house's waiter only greeted them briefly, and didn't come over again. Firstly, this group of people had clearly stated that they weren't to be disturbed. Secondly, these people seemed to be exhaling a cold aura, and no one would dare to provoke them. This group of people was naturally the Silver Blizzard cities, Xinxian and Tianxian. The 7 Swords and the 6 Elders, Xiao Han, Mu Shuetong, Han Yenmeng and Xiao Fengwu, and a total of 17 people. The Silver Blizzard city's trip to Tiannan could be said to be extremely depressing. The Jun family and Jun Wui had been plotted against, and there was no chance of survival. But in the end, the situation had turned into a blessing. Even the Silver Blizzard city didn't dare to act rashly. The main purpose of this trip was to deal with the solitary eagle of the prairie, but they didn't have the opportunity to do so. Finally, an extremely mysterious black-robed man appeared out of nowhere. His strength was so strong that even the 6 Elders and the 7 Swords were terrified. They were afraid that the mysterious man would cause trouble for the Jun family. So, they didn't even wait for the matter to finish before they left. They were preparing to pass through Tianxiang, and then set off from the aristocratic hall to return to the Silver Blizzard city. Everything that had happened here had already been reported back to the Silver Blizzard city through an eagle. The higher-ups of the Silver City, who had received this shocking news, immediately sensed an extreme danger from this unusual news. That black-clothed man had the strength to kill Supreme Master Zhu Tian with just a wave of his hand. One could well imagine how powerful he was. The Xiao family's great elder, Xiao Xingyun, and the Silver Blizzard City's lord simultaneously issued an order for all the people from Tiannan to immediately withdraw without delay. All the members of the Silver City who were outside retreated and clenched their fists, ready to react. The severity of this order was even higher than that of the time when the Blizzard Silver City was at a disadvantage against the Dongfang family. At that time, the Blizzard Silver City was confident that they could turn the situation around. Firstly, not all of the higher-ups of the Silver City had been mobilized. Secondly, the people of the continent wouldn't sit back and watch as Dongfang's assassins wreaked havoc in the world. But this time it was completely different. The degree of mystery and terror was far beyond that of the Dongfang family. Moreover, he wouldn't oppose the whole world. If he really wanted to deal with the Silver Blizzard City, he believed that the other countries, families, and forces would only watch from the sidelines. No one would help the Silver Blizzard City like last time. Therefore, this order could be said to be extremely urgent. From this order, it could be seen that the Silver City's higher-ups were shocked, nervous, and even panicked. Along the way, Xiao Han was on the verge of going crazy. His eyes were bloodshot, and his mind was close to a state of insanity. Along the way, the number of innocent people who had died by his hand was no less than 10. At this rate, I'm afraid that he won't even need to return to the Blizzard Silver City before he goes completely crazy. An extremely insignificant person had actually stolen an excellent fiancé from someone as excellent as me. For many years, I've had an incomparable sense of superiority, and I've gotten used to beating this weakling for fun. No matter how heroic he is, no matter how unyielding he is, I'm far stronger than him. Moreover, my background is more than 10 times stronger than his. Therefore, I can naturally humiliate, toy with, and wreak havoc on him at will. I, Xiao Han, am the pride of the heavens. But, who do you think you are, Junwei? Therefore, I've always had a kind of tyrannical pleasure for all these years. Who asked you to steal my wife? I'll destroy your family, cut off your descendants, and bring shame to the world. But I won't die. I'll humiliate you little by little, and toy with you until you die. But now, this insignificant cripple that I can humiliate and toy with at will has transformed into an existence that I can no longer afford to provoke. And all of this had happened because of a mysterious man who had suddenly appeared. And that mysterious man had changed everything. This sudden and huge contrast was equivalent to a person who had been high up in the heavens. He had looked down upon the common people, and had suddenly lost all his advantages. And he had suddenly fallen to the basement of the 18th layer of hell. How could a narrow-minded person like Xiao Han bear such a huge blow? Moreover, the 13 elders who had followed him were all experts on the same level as Shen Xian. They were all top-notch people. So, their combined strength was enough to sweep away the entire secular world. But such a tyrannical force hadn't dared to stand up for him in the face of this mysterious man's deterrence. In fact, they hadn't even dared to think of doing so. Therefore, he had gone crazy. In fact, it could be said that he had completely collapsed. In fact, he didn't have any other thoughts besides insanity. Xiao Buyu, the leader of the Silver Blizzard City, had no choice but to postpone the journey because of Xiao Han's collapse and insanity. This matter had made the second master of the Xiao family, who had always been able to summon the wind and summon the rain, lose face. In fact, he hadn't even lost face like this when he had faced the old lady of Dongfang, who was much stronger than his brother. Moreover, he knew what Xiao Han was thinking and hoping for. But he hadn't dared to make his grandson's wishes come true. Therefore, he felt even more guilty towards Xiao Han. In fact, he would have been too ashamed to show his face if he had allowed his grandson to go crazy. Therefore, the group stopped to rest. What does Junwei count for? He's just a good-for-nothing who borrowed the strength of an outsider. How can he compete with me? I'm nobler than him. I'm better than him. I should have trampled on him all my life. I should have trampled on him as I pleased. I should have toyed with him. He's an insignificant cripple. And he will always be. Xiao Han had gone crazy, and was shouting incessantly. He didn't have the demeanor of a powerful Tianxian expert anymore. Nobody responded to him. That was because everyone knew that he was talking nonsense. What does Jun Wui count for? He's a dignified blood general. He's unhindered on the battlefield, and has never tasted defeat. He has such outstanding achievements at such a young age. Who knows how much glory he would have had if the elders of the Shao family hadn't intervened. But Jun Wui has been crippled for 10 years, but he hasn't become a cripple. His cultivation has reached the middle level of Tianxian. What kind of unswerving determination and willpower is that? And who do you think you are, Xiao Han? The Silver Blizzard City and the Shao family have provided you with the best techniques, the best training environment, and countless rare medicines. But you're only at the primary level of Tianxian. And you still have the nerve to say that I'm a nobody? I've decided to have a decisive battle with Jun Wui. I'm a man who's been robbed of his wife. Xiao Han realized that his words had no basis to back them up. So, it was difficult for him to say them again. His eyes reddened, and his body trembled as he looked straight at Xiao Buyu. These words seemed to have been squeezed out from the bottom of his heart. They were hoarse and low, and resembled a broken gong. Perhaps this was the only explanation that Xiao Han could come up with. I don't care about life or death. I must fight with him. Jun Wui and I can't coexist in this world. Xiao Han was so excited that his fingers were trembling. His hair was disheveled and his face was pale. His eyes were crazed. I'll go alone if you don't agree. Otherwise, I'll die here. I won't go back to the Silver Blizzard City. I won't have the face to go back. Xiao Han's complexion was exceptionally miserable at this moment. He was extremely ashamed and resentful. Even Han Yanmeng, who didn't have a good impression of him, had a look of pity in her eyes. He's a man who's been robbed of his fiancée, even though his fiancée doesn't have any feelings for him. But it's one thing for both parties to renounce the engagement. But it's another thing for someone to snatch his love away. Xiao Buyu's gaze was deep as he looked at the other elders. Then, everyone slowly nodded. Xiao Han's decision was irrevocable. Everyone had been in the world of martial arts, and they were all men. So, how could they not understand? Xiao Han didn't dare to eradicate the Jun family. But he was the victim. So, he had to fight with the man who'd stolen his wife. So, there was nothing wrong with that. The words, wife robbed, had always been Xiao Han's biggest taboo. No one in the Silver Blizzard City, not even the elders of the Shao family, had ever dared to mention it. But he'd said it now. So, it was clear to see how sullen he was. Xiao Han would have died of sullenness if he didn't fulfill his request. Or, he would have sunk into madness. Therefore, the 17 men from the Silver Blizzard City arrived on the path that Jun Wui's army would pass through. They would challenge him once the army arrived. They believed that Jun Wui wouldn't refuse a duel between two men even if he was in a disadvantageous position and couldn't move freely. So, they let Xiao Han humiliate him to vent his pent-up anger. In fact, it would be fine as long as he didn't take his life. Their strength wasn't ordinary. So, they moved very quickly. They had been waiting for 4 days now. But Jun Wui's army still hadn't arrived. However, the most unfortunate thing was that they didn't meet Jun Wui. Instead, they met someone else. The sun was setting. Another day was about to pass. The people from the Silver Blizzard City were getting ready for dinner. This small tea house had been transformed into a restaurant ever since they'd arrived. The Silver Blizzard City's leaders looked cold and indifferent. But they were rich and overbearing. The money they'd given to the owner of the tea house was enough to cover his annual income. Therefore, the owner of the tea house wasn't disgusted. On the contrary, he was very happy. In fact, he was thankful that the god of wealth had descended upon him. Moreover, the people from the Silver Blizzard City had instructed him not to be disturbed. So, the owner of the tea house was even happier. Just then, the sound of hooves could be heard coming from the direction of Tian-nan. Then, 2 horses galloped over at a moderate pace. 2 women. The following words were free of charge. The book comments section is in a mess. I've also taken a look. I'm somewhat speechless about the rumor of manipulating the vote. I was once a reader. I understand what you're feeling, because I've experienced it too. I understand, but that doesn't mean that I accept it. Let me say this. If it were a normal month, it might be disturbing. But this is September. It'll be October 1st in a dozen days. According to Chidian's tradition, there'll be a doubling of the monthly votes on October 1st every year. And this doubling will start on the last 2 days of September. For example, this year's doubling of the monthly votes on May 1st will start on April 29th. Everyone knows about this. Now, I'm spending a lot of money to manipulate the vote. So, I'll become a joke when I'm defeated by 2 votes on the last 2 days? I just want to ask one thing. Am I really that stupid? So, who's the stupid one? My brothers and sisters are accumulating votes one by one. Many small grains of sand are piled up into a tower. This is the result of our joint efforts. I'm not trying to explain to you that I'm manipulating the votes. The truth is right there. There's no need to explain. I'm just feeling wronged for my brothers' and sisters' kind intentions. My friendship with my brothers can't be buried. I'll remember it deeply. Or this month, we'll suffer a huge loss if the votes are doubled at the end of the month. Because I've already squeezed too hard in the early stages. Or, I might not be able to continue. But I'll fight until the end of the month. Even if I'm out of the top 10 or 20, I, Feng Ling Tian, will have a clear conscience. There's nothing else in this life. I only seek peace of mind. Every single monthly vote is an acknowledgement. Every single penny from subscriptions is pure. It's a kind intention. I'll be worthy of this acknowledgement. I'll be worthy of this kind intention. As for the rest, I don't care. Chapter 410. Today's second update has arrived. Well, it will break out tomorrow as per usual. This will be the 9th update of the month. Start preparing now. There should be another update at midnight. I've said that I'll fight till the end. So, I'll fight till the end. Moon. Ticket. Everyone from the Silver City was left dumbfounded as they swept their eyes over the screen. Especially Xiao Fengwu. His eyes suddenly emitted a blazing radiance. He wasn't the only one. Even the 6 elders and the 7 swords of the Silver City couldn't help but have a look of amazement in their eyes. Even Xiao Han, who was on the verge of losing his mind, had a dull look in his eyes at this moment. 2 young girls, one dressed in white and the other in green, were galloping towards them. The green-clothed girl's complexion was obvious. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that she had disguised herself. Her figure was graceful, but her face was dark. So, it was difficult to say that she was pretty. Only her pair of quick-witted eyes were like limpid autumn waters. They were curiously sizing up the surroundings. She looked like a little girl who was going out for the first time. She was full of curiosity about everything. She looked pure and adorable. Her face had been disguised. But everyone couldn't help but overlook this fact. Then, they looked at the white-clothed woman on the horse behind them. This was the real reason why everyone had lost their composure. Her clothes were whiter than snow, her black hair was like the clouds, and her facial features were regular. But just when everyone wanted to see her face, they realized that in front of her peerless elegance, no one actually had the courage to see what this woman looked like. They could only feel that she was abnormally pure and holy. No matter how beautiful or peerless a woman was, in front of this woman in white, there was only one feeling: inferiority. She was like the bright moon in the sky. Her cold radiance had been sprinkled over the earth. But no one could ever approach her. She was unattainable, yet elegant and graceful. She was like a fairy from the 9th heaven. She had floated down to the mortal world. Her figure was slender and well-proportioned. But everyone could only see her beauty. But they couldn't see how she looked or how beautiful she was. If one were to use the words used to describe women in the human world to describe this woman, then no matter how beautiful the words were, they would all seem pale and powerless. The beauty of this white-clothed woman couldn't be described with words. It should only belong to the heavens. It shouldn't belong to the mortal world. She was absolutely a devilish beauty. What was the point of saying that she was devastatingly beautiful? So what if she was devastatingly beautiful? If for this woman, not to mention a country or a city, even the entire Xian continent would collapse. Everyone had this kind of thought. Her body seemed to be naturally shrouded in a layer of mysterious veil, like a peony in a smoke screen. Looking at flowers in the mist, it was hazy yet incomparably clear yet indiscernible. This kind of feeling made everyone who saw her exclaim in their hearts, "So, there's actually such a beauty in this world." This was a peerless beauty, a peerless elegance. From the moment she suddenly appeared on the road, the setting sun in the west seemed to have stopped its footsteps, just for this rare white-clothed woman, emitting thousands of rays of multicolored light. Just as she flipped off the horse and stood gracefully on the ground, the rays of light behind her suddenly dimmed, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to have suddenly been dyed with an unparalleled immortal chi, glistening brightly. At this moment, no one from the Silver City realized that the white-clothed woman and the green-clothed woman had a strange look in their eyes when they saw the people from the Silver City. But they returned to normal in the next instant. "Elder sister, we've been hurrying all this time, and we're really tired. Why don't we rest here for a while, and have a cup of tea before we continue on our journey?" The green-clothed woman's voice was like an oriole's, crisp and melodious. "Younger sister's words are reasonable. Haste makes waste. Let's rest for a while before we continue on our journey. In any case, they are still behind us." The white-clothed woman seemed to smile, and the people from the Silver City suddenly felt as if 100 flowers were blooming in front of them. No, even if 100 flowers were really blooming, it wouldn't be able to resist the beauty of this smile. "It's just that there are already so many people here. I don't know if the owner can add 2 more seats. Moreover, this is the countryside. How can we get good tea leaves?" The white-clothed woman frowned slightly, as if she was somewhat worried. Ladies, please take a seat here. I cough. It's fine to stand here for a while. There's snow tea from the Han family here. It's also of the highest quality. Although it might not be able to catch your eye, this place is remote, so please bear with it. Xiao Feng Wu had been infatuated with the white-clothed girl the moment he had laid his eyes on her. So, he hastily stood up with a fervent look on his face. He eagerly offered her the Silver Blizzard City's unique top-grade tea, snow tea. Then, he politely brushed the chair with his sleeve. He didn't forget to impatiently say to Han Yenmeng, "Sister, your back must be tired after sitting for so long, right? Come, let's stand for a while and rest our backs." Han Yenmeng immediately pouted, her face full of displeasure. What did this senior brother of mine just say? The snow tea of the Silver City is one of the few heavenly tea leaves in the world. If this tea is not pleasing to my eyes, then I really don't know what other tea would be pleasing to my eyes. His words are so incoherent. Where is the demeanor of an outstanding youth of the Silver City? How could I be in the same generation as such a person? In fact, Xiao Feng Wu should have called her martial aunt, if they were to strictly judge seniority. However, the elders of the Silver City had said that she was too young, and they had forcibly put her down by a generation. Wouldn't I have to call my sister martial aunt, if I were to calculate this in reverse? This is the truth. Han Yenmeng had vaguely come to realize that this seniority hadn't been randomly assigned. Instead, it had been deliberately arranged by someone. This had been done for the sake of her marriage. She was too young. Most of her peers were already in their 30s or 40s. and there were many outstanding men of similar age in the next generation. But there was still a gap in seniority between them. Anyway, the natural order of the world couldn't be disobeyed. Moreover, the Han and Shao families of the Silver City didn't wish to marry outsiders in order to avoid unnecessary trouble in the future. Therefore, they had forcibly put her down by a generation. In particular, senior brother Xiao Fengwu, who was standing in front of him, seemed to be the husband of the two families. However, she hadn't been able to understand this due to her young age. Moreover, she was afraid that an embarrassing incident like what had happened to her sister would happen. But Xiao Fengwu would inevitably be the one to accompany her for the rest of her life if everything went smoothly. This approach was somewhat like burying one's head in the sand. But no one in the Silver City had ever said anything about it. After all, it would inevitably lead to a turbulence in the Silver City if she were to recruit an outsider as her husband. But it wouldn't happen now. But she had no choice but to consider the future generations. In fact, Han Yenmeng didn't have a favorable impression of this senior brother. But she didn't have a bad impression either. She was still in a state of ignorance. But Xiao Fengwu had been so attentive to a woman whom he had just met. The little girl found it funny. But she still felt somewhat uncomfortable in her heart. Then, he had asked her to give up her seat. And it seemed as if he was afraid that she would offend that woman if she didn't give up her seat. And the elders of the Shao family actually did not stand out to say anything. This man is like this. How could this unforeseen event not make the little girl feel extremely wronged? She tilted her head and pretended that she hadn't heard anything. You're acting cheap, but you're dragging me down with you? Who do you think you are? Who cares about you? Junior sister, please step aside. Xiao Fengwu anxiously looked at Han Yenmeng. Then, he looked at the white-clothed woman in fear. He was afraid that she would get angry and leave in a fit of rage. So, he called out again in a pleading tone. Fengwu, how can you speak to the little princess like this? Mu Shuetong couldn't stand it any longer. He shouted in an angry voice. This shout had made the Silver City's higher-ups realize that a conflict had arisen in this place. One look at Xiao Fengwu's appearance made them realize that the Xiao family's grandson had fallen in love with the white-clothed woman at first sight. Han Yenmeng was even more unhappy. She had always been the most pampered daughter of the Xiao family. So, how could she endure this? Moreover, none of the elders who had always doted on her had opened their mouths to support her. She couldn't help but pout her small mouth, wrinkle her nose, stamp her feet, and stand up in anger. She then said, Xiao Fengwu, you're good. I finally know you today. She angrily ran to Mu Shuetong's side, and leaned against him in an aggrieved manner. She couldn't help but shed tears. Young lady, please take a seat. I've been neglecting you since we've been living in the wilderness. I'll personally prepare some tea for you. Xiao Fengwu didn't seem to have paid any attention to Han Yenmeng's words. Instead, he deftly wiped Han Yenmeng's chair with an attentive look on his face. Thank you very much, young master. A trace of contempt flashed in the green-clothed girl's eyes. The two women gently walked over. The fragrance of the fragrant tea assailed everyone's nostrils as they passed by. And they suddenly felt a rare sense of contentment. The white-clothed woman didn't say a word from beginning to end. In fact, she didn't even have any special expression on her face. You're welcome, you're welcome. I'm Xiao Fengwu. May I ask the honored names of the two young ladies? Xiao Fengwu rubbed his hands. His face was brimming with honor. The green-clothed girl rolled her eyes and said, My elder sister's surname is Mei. And my surname is also Mei. Mei? That's a good surname. May hee plum blossoms, orchid blossoms, and bamboo blossoms in the bitter cold of winter. The plum blossoms are noble and unblemished. They're the best in the cold, the most virtuous, and the most virtuous. Young lady is fresh and refined. You're like a celestial being. You're really, Xiao Feng Wu's face was full of admiration. But he stammered really for a long time. So, he didn't know what to say. May? The 7 swords and the 6 elders of the Silver Blizzard City trembled as they heard this name. This surname wasn't a big deal. But they had just returned from the Southern Heaven region. And they had just witnessed the earth-shattering strength of the Venerable May of the Tian Fa forest. So, they had a lingering fear of the surname, May. May I ask the young lady where you've come from? I've traveled the world for decades, and I've met many people, but I've rarely seen such an outstanding talent like the young lady. Perhaps the young lady is the descendant of an old friend of mine. Xiao Buyu stroked his beard as he chuckled. We sisters are from Tianxiang. Our families are businessmen. The white-clothed girl still didn't speak. She only looked down at her snow tea. She remained motionless. So, the green-clothed girl continued to speak. 2 single women are traveling the world alone. It seems that these 2 young ladies have extraordinary skills. Xiao Buyu became more and more suspicious the more he looked at them. These 2 women didn't seem to have any xian cultivation on their bodies, no matter how he looked at them. But he was only 1 step away from becoming a great master. So, he couldn't help but feel his heart tighten. Chapter 411. The 9th outbreak of this month. The first one has arrived. I can't stand it anymore. I'm exhausted. I'm going to sleep. The 3rd one will arrive in the evening. We don't travel alone in the world. We have guards. But they don't usually appear in front of people. The green-clothed girl seemed to have blurted out this sentence. She covered her mouth before she could finish speaking. Her round eyes seemed to have turned in panic. She let out a hollow laugh. It seemed that she was terrified. Xiao Buyu's heart calmed down. It seemed that his previous feeling had been an illusion. He had been overly apprehensive lately. Moreover, these 2 women didn't have the slightest xian qi fluctuation. So, it seemed that these 2 women weren't important people. So, it didn't matter as long as they weren't from the Southern Heaven City. He had been scared a moment ago. After all, this white-clothed girl had some sort of relationship with Venerable May. That would have been a disaster for him. But it seemed that this wasn't the case now. That's easy to handle since it's not the case. Feng Wu has a very good impression of this girl. I've never heard of any family in the secular world that could resist the temptation of the Silver Blizzard City. It's normal for a man to have 3 or 4 wives. So, it wouldn't be a big deal even if Feng Wu were to marry one more. It would be fine as long as the little princess is the legal wife. Xiao Buyu gave Xiao Han a meaningful look as he thought of this. Xiao Han still looked somewhat deranged. His mind had calmed down, and he was waiting to fight with Junwei. However, he still hadn't recovered from the exhaustion of the last few days. Xiao Han should be able to act like a madman in this state. Then, I'll be able to turn things around in case it doesn't work. No matter what, Xiao Feng Wu was still his own great-grandson. This girl is outstanding. She's an outstanding beauty. So, it doesn't matter even if her family background is a little inferior. So, it's not a big deal. His judgment was very accurate. This white-clothed woman had absolutely no relationship with the Venerable May in his heart. This was absolutely true. However, he had never thought that. Feng Wu, have you taken a fancy to this white-clothed girl? Xiao Han understood tacitly and raised his head to look at his nephew. He deliberately acted as if he was about to go crazy again. Xiao Feng Wu was at a loss. He stealthily glanced at the white-clothed woman and stammered, Uncle, I'm only asking you, am I right or not? Do you think this girl is very beautiful? You want to marry me? Xiao Han looked like he was drunk. He slammed the table and glared at him. The meaning was clear. If you like her, Uncle will help you be the bad guy. The green-clothed girl rolled her eyes. Marry my boss? You guys are really something. Yes, but… Xiao Fengwu was indeed a bit bossy and domineering, but he was still young after all. He was still a bit embarrassed after hearing such things. His face was still lacking in training. That's enough. Uncle, I will help you. Xiao Han turned to the woman in white and said in a condescending tone, Dare I ask this young lady, have you ever heard of my Silver Blizzard City? If the heavens wanted to destroy someone, they would first make him crazy. But what if that person was pretending to be crazy? If the heavens wanted to destroy someone, then they could do it. But what if that person was pretending to be crazy? Mu Shuetong's gaze was fixed on the white-clothed woman, while Xiao Han was acting like a madman and saying these words. The so-called love of beauty was something that everyone had. Mu Shuetong didn't have any improper thoughts because of this, but he still wanted to protect her. He didn't want such a beautiful woman to be defiled by the Xiao family's uncle and nephew. However, he couldn't stand up for that girl. Moreover, any discerning person could see that Xiao Buyu was the mastermind behind all of this. So, what would be the point of standing up for her if she stood up for him? However, he found it strange that he couldn't see the woman's face clearly even with his cultivation at such a short distance. However, this woman gave off a very realistic feeling. She wasn't wearing any disguise, nor was she wearing a veil. She was barefaced, but no one could see her face clearly. What's going on? What does this feeling mean? Moreover, Mu Shuetong was most puzzled by the conversation between Xiao Han and Xiao Fengwu. And he was afraid that anyone would have been able to hear the vulgar undertones in their conversation, especially when they were talking about the white-clothed woman. It was believed that any other woman would have been so embarrassed that she wouldn't have been able to show her face. However, this woman's expression hadn't changed from beginning to end. In fact, it seemed as if she hadn't heard anything. She was still holding her cup of snow tea, and was carefully savoring it. In fact, it seemed as if she only had eyes for that exceptional fragrant tea. Even if it was a simple and crude teacup in the countryside, in her hands, it was like holding the golden tripod of the imperial palace. She didn't even bat an eyelid when Xiao Han asked her a question. It seemed as if she hadn't heard him at all. It seemed as if the words Silver Blizzard City were nothing in her eyes. In fact, they didn't even have any meaning. Silver Blizzard City? What kind of place is that? The green-clothed girl smiled tenderly. She then tilted her head in a cute manner. It seemed as if she was thinking about it carefully. Then, she revealed an apologetic and sincere expression as she said, I'm really sorry. I've never been to that place. I've never even heard of it. Is it very famous? Xiao Han paused for a moment. He knew that these two people would look at him with admiration as soon as he mentioned the Silver Blizzard City. Then, he would ask them a few questions, and he would be able to easily find out the ins and outs of the matter. Then, he would directly propose a marriage. And he believed that nobody would dare to refuse a marriage proposal from the Silver Blizzard City. However, the reality was very different from what he had imagined. The opposite party hadn't even heard of the Silver Blizzard City. This made Xiao Han and Xiao Fengwu, who had been accumulating their strength for a long time, feel as if they had punched into cotton. Not only were they unable to exert their strength, but they had even twisted their wrists. It would have been fine if he didn't know, but the other party didn't know, and had a sincere look on his face as if he had done something wrong. This made Xiao Han, who wanted to use this as a pretext to make a fuss, at a loss of what to do. Of course, if Xiao Han knew who the two women he was forcing to marry were, he probably wouldn't even be able to wait until Jun Wui arrived. The Silver Blizzard City is our hometown. The two young ladies are not Xian experts. Moreover, they don't know any Xian expert. So, they haven't come into contact with this level. Xiao Fengwu hastily smiled. But, there was a hint of arrogance in his tone. But, I believe that there are no Xian cultivators in the continent who haven't heard of the Silver Blizzard City. The Silver Blizzard City is the pinnacle of the Xian continent. It's so powerful, the green-clothed girl exclaimed. She covered her mouth with her small white hands. Then, she suddenly said in surprise, "The Silver Blizzard City. Is it made of snow? Won't it melt under the sun?" The Silver Blizzard City. It's just a name. Of course, it's not made of ice and snow, Xiao Feng Wu stupidly explained. But, why haven't we heard of such a famous place? The green-clothed girl looked at him suspiciously. Then, she suddenly realized. Oh, I remember now. The Silver Blizzard City. Xiao Han and his nephew let out a long sigh. You finally remembered. Then, it'll be easy to talk about it in the future. That's right. You should have heard of the Silver Blizzard City even if you don't have Xianqi. The green-clothed girl looked at the white-clothed girl and said, Elder sister, when we were playing in the slums during the New Year, didn't they make a big pile of snow? Elder sister, you made them build a wall and build a castle, didn't you? At that time, you personally gave it a name. You said that this place should be called the Silver Blizzard City. Let it stay outside during the cold winter month. If it's inconvenient for us to travel, we can go in and relieve ourselves. Isn't that right? The white-clothed girl smiled and slowly nodded. This was her first action. The green-clothed girl suddenly jumped up in excitement. Then, she arrogantly looked at Xiao Han and Xiao Feng Wu. Humph! I was wondering where this place was. It turns out to be our countryside's latrine. Your names were given to you by my elder sister. What's there to be proud of? You're dressed so well. Don't tell me you've made a fortune? If you've made a fortune, why do you still want to live in a latrine? It's probably because you've just made a fortune. So, you haven't built a new house yet. I think there's a word for this. What's it called? Oh, that's right. It's called nouveau riche. The corners of Xiao Han's mouth twitched. It seemed as if he was about to fly into a rage. On the other side, Xiao Feng Wu was dumbstruck. The young master of the Silver Blizzard City couldn't react. He kept thinking, is there really such a coincidence in this world? Impudent slut! You're full of nonsense! Xiao Han angrily shouted. He stood up, and the imposing aura of a Tianxian expert swept out. He had been mad and irritable all this way. So, it was as if oil had been poured on a fire when he heard these words. How could he care about these two weak women in front of him? In any case, he had killed at least 80 people along the way. So, why would he care about 2 more? Uncle, please calm down. Uncle, please don't be angry. This may be just a coincidence. You see, they're the daughters of a rich family. So, it's understandable that they don't know about the Silver Blizzard City. Xiao Feng Wu hastily tried to mediate. He was so anxious that his forehead was dripping with sweat. He had been captivated by the peerless elegance of this white-clothed girl the moment he saw her. He felt that it would be good if he could even talk to her. It seemed as if he had completely lost his ability to judge. Get lost. You evil creature. Can't you see that she's playing with us? Xiao Han was very angry. He wanted to throw his nephew out. What did you just say? Say it again if you have the guts. An exceptionally cold and awe-inspiring voice resounded. It seemed as if a cold wind had blown out of hell. Even the strongest expert of the Silver Blizzard City, Xiao Buyu, couldn't help but shiver. The smile on the face and eyes of the green-clothed girl, who was as pretty as a flower, had completely disappeared at this moment. What replaced it was actually a dense killing intent. Her pair of quick-witted eyes had turned into 2 bottomless pits at this moment. Xiao Feng Wu had only taken a glance at them, and he felt as if he was about to be sucked into a bottomless whirlpool. Xiao Buyu was frightened. Great master-level cultivation. The aura of a great master-level cultivation. Even Xiao Buyu couldn't display such a formidable aura. Who is this green-clothed girl? It doesn't matter who this green-clothed girl is. But this matter has become very serious. The atmosphere in the field had become very tense. In fact, it seemed that a fight could break out at any moment. Xiao Han's lowly servant had finally brought about a huge problem. He couldn't deal with it, he couldn't solve it, and he couldn't even face it. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.